Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NBA Deeper Dive presented by Prize Picks. We got a crazy 13-game slate tonight, so we're going to have to really get this one right to get the money. Fortunately, we got the perfect guy to help us figure out how to crack this one. Adam, should my money share? Adam, how you doing, man?
Doing pretty well. Excited to talk about this one. I think it's actually going to be a little bit easier to talk about than yesterday's, where it was 4 games with not much value and a lot of stuff to dive into. So looking forward to talking about I think the biggest slate we've had all season long.
Yeah, this is crazy. Obviously, because there's no Thanksgiving games, they got them all today. Let's talk a little bit about last night. Jokic was questionable, and then he got ruled out. How did you approach that one?
I had 93% Jokic and then just made a lot of late swaps to get to a lot of Aaron Gordon, a lot of Will Barton, a lot of guys that just absolutely sucked. So it didn't do me any good, but it was one of those slates where I was pretty happy with how I played it, because I think that if I got to play that slate a lot and just get, Will Barton, Aaron Gordon, those guys at, 13, 15% owned, I think that it typically is going to go pretty well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of people don't make the right swaps, so they'll only swap if they have Jokic. But then if you swap all your lineups, you can get a big advantage. Before we get into the game by game breakdown, guys, if you could hit that like button, that gives us the positive feedback and good karma we need. Of course, we can give you the best plays, but then we need the athletes to go out there and perform like we're expecting. So we need all the karma we can get. Also, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button. We got a lot of content about all the different sports, NBA every day, NFL tomorrow, and every day pretty much. So let's break down the slate here. So the first game we got, Detroit is a huge underdog versus Milwaukee. I don't know why. I mean, they were playing pretty well versus the Heat last night, but I know that Cade Cunningham has been kind of a popular play, but his salary has increased, so he's no longer like a ridiculous price. Meanwhile, you have Luke Garza, who drew the start last night. Not necessarily guaranteed that he'll start tonight against Portis, but probably a likelihood. What are you doing with the Pistons tonight?
Yeah, I think it's a really scary spot for Detroit. I mean, there is some value to be had here. My guess is that Trey Lyles starts in place of Garza, but that could go a variety of ways. But either way, I mean, this is a spot where they are 15-point dogs on the road on a back-to-back against one of the best teams in the NBA. You can certainly make a case for guys like Corey Joseph, who is probable. He's 4,400, played 34 minutes last night, played 39 minutes against the Lakers 2 games ago when he started in place of Killian Hayes. If this game's competitive, I assume the minutes are going to be there for Joseph, but that's a really big if. Same can be said for guys like Cade Cunningham, Jeremy Grant, Sadiq Bey. I think that they all still have ceilings at their price tags. It's just really hard to feel confident in their playing time. We had another game last night where Cade Cunningham was in foul trouble, so that limited him to 30 minutes. But we have seen that if the game's competitive and he's able to avoid fouls, he has the potential to play 36 to 38 minutes at virtually no ownership tonight. So, there's a ceiling there, but it's also a 13-game slate where there's going to be a lot of good plays and a lot of them aren't going to be that popular. So in all, I think this is a pretty difficult team to get to.
Oh man, I was hoping you would not say that, but it's hard to argue with you here. I think Trey Lyles is kind of interesting. He played about 23 minutes last night compared to Garza with 17, and then they closed with a small lineup. So they did go centers most of the time, although Lyles usually plays power forward. He was playing center last night. So that's kind of interesting. Let's go to Milwaukee. On the Milwaukee side, it's hard to count on the minutes here, but I mean, you got Giannis. He's a fantastic player. Bobby Portis also has been getting a lot of minutes recently. Is anyone on Milwaukee a priority for you tonight?
I wouldn't say a priority. Certainly not going to be upset getting to a piece here and there from Milwaukee because they do have a 114 implied total. But this is a situation where, we've talked about it before. You don't really want to discount guys too much that are likely to be on the winning end of a blowout, because even if they lose minutes, they're likely to produce at an elevated rate in those minutes. The issue, though, is with someone like Giannis at 12-2, there does still come a point where it's kind of impossible for him to produce enough points over, like 24 minutes to be someone that you really want on a 13-game slate at 12-2. So he's not projected for much ownership. I think that, clearly he still is capable of getting 70 plus DraftKings points, but there's some real risk in his playing time here. You saw in Milwaukee's last game, he only played about 23 and a half minutes in a massive blowout against Orlando. You could certainly see the same sort of thing here. So the fact you don't have a ton of really good cheap value on this slate, at least as of right now, combined with Giannis being really expensive, makes it tough to get there. Drew Holiday, Bobby Portis, those guys look fine at their salaries. I think they're pretty good contrarian plays, but in the context of all 13 games, I don't see a whole lot that stands out here.
Agreed. Yeah, I think Giannis would probably be the guy, or Portis, but I'm a little hesitant to lock up the spots that early in the night with guys that I don't love. So let's speed through the games here. We got 13, so we're not going to be able to cover every player. Brooklyn, 1-point favorite on the road versus Boston. For this one, Joe Harris and Bruce Brown continue to be out. As a result, Patty Mills and Bembry have been getting the starts. How are you prioritizing the Nets tonight?
I don't see too much that I'm prioritizing here. One thing that I think we do need to pay attention to is what the starting lineup is. I haven't seen if they're going to start with Aldridge or go back to Blake Griffin, but LaMarcus Aldridge started the second half last game, ended up playing 34 and a half minutes. That is really important because Aldridge has been a fantasy monster when he's on the floor this year. It's just been a matter of, is he playing 24 minutes and splitting with Blake Griffin, or is he getting a ton of minutes over Griffin? So in tournaments at 5,300, I think that whether he starts or not, you can take some shots at him and just hope that, it's a game he happens to play 30 minutes. But if he starts, that would drive up his ownership, but also signal that he's likely to be on the plus end of that split with Blake Griffin. So he could potentially look really good. Outside of that, though, I think it's pretty difficult to get to James Harden or Kevin Durant at their salaries since both guys are active. I think that, Patty Mills looks okay. Bembry at 3,400 looks okay. But with there being so many games tonight, I don't have anything I'm prioritizing here unless, maybe we get news that Aldridge is starting.
It's worth noting that last game, Blake didn't play at all in the second half. It was Paul Millsap that was subbing in for Aldridge, which is why he got so many minutes last game. And with his heart issues, I'd be surprised if he was a 30-minute a night guy. So that was actually surprising to me that he got so many minutes that game. But we'll see if he's inserted in the starting lineup. That will definitely make more of a bull case for Aldridge. Bembry and Mills are guys you could look at as well, but nothing to get too excited about. On the Boston side, Jaylen Brown came back last game and played about 26 minutes. Now that's a pretty encouraging sign, but on the sites he's priced like just a normal full minutes price, so there's not really much incentive to go there, and it kind of hurts the rest of the team at the same time. So I'd say that this isn't a great night to target the Celtics. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I don't think it's a great night either. As long as these guys are in, we got a weird report from one of the Celtics beat writers earlier. So you have Jaylen Brown's listed as questionable, Josh Richardson's listed as questionable, Robert Williams listed as questionable. Grant Williams in his, I don't know, at some point to the media today said something about some guys needing to step up because guys are out. And then he was informed that nobody's listed out on the injury report, and he kind of just was like, yeah, okay, well, guys are out. So I don't know what to make of that, but maybe we're gonna get some Boston news that stuff opens up. But if we assume that Brown is in and Richardson is in and Williams is in, I don't see a whole lot that stands out in, to me. I think that Robert Williams at 5,600 has a nice ceiling still. He gives you defensive stat upside, but we know that Al Horford's really cut into his rates this year. Marcus Smart is likely to play a lot of minutes, but there's only so much shot volume to go around when Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are in. If you were to get a situation where, Brown sits, then Dennis Schroeder is going to look better. Tatum's going to look better. If Williams were to sit, then Al Horford looks better. But assuming those guys are in, it's pretty difficult to prioritize much of Boston.
Agreed. Yeah, for me, it'd be Robert Williams. If he is out, then Grant Williams probably starts. That wouldn't be that exciting. But Robert Williams, Jaylen Brown, and Josh Richardson are all questionable for this one. So So it's a little bit hard to speculate. If all those guys are out, then it could be an interesting game in fantasy. Right now, we're not too worried about it because this will be news that we'll assuredly have before lock, at least 30 minutes. So let's move on to Philadelphia, Golden State. Philadelphia had a lot of guys out last game. Seth Curry, Tobias, and Danny Green were all out, but they're all questionable today. So you potentially have a lot of guys coming back for the Sixers. What are you anticipating today?
Yeah, so I'm assuming that they play, but this is one spot. I think this is the kind of the most questionable spot on the slate because it's the last game of the night at 10 o'clock. So we probably won't have this news, and it does potentially matter. But assuming that everybody's in, all that I really see from Philadelphia is Tobias Harris at 8K in a spot where, Golden State's been very good defensively this year, but they are a fast-paced team. They are going to make it really easy for Philadelphia to play small if they want to, which typically they have been doing when Harris is in. I think he would look good at 8K, and there's a good chance he's going to be low owned because of the Q tag and this being a 10 p.m. game. And then it's not going to be that difficult to swap off of him, assuming you're going to have him in a utility spot, most likely. Worst case is a forward spot, but you'll potentially get, if he were ruled out, or if him and Curry and Green, whatever, were ruled out, it would make Andre Drummond look better for $200 more. It would open up, George Niang for $4,700. So there would potentially be some good swaps here if you have Harris and then he gets ruled out.
My bad, guys. I totally forgot to sort the games by time today.
I was wondering what was going on.
Yeah, so we'll be over the board here, but it's okay. There's okay. So the problem here is you're gonna have a lot of players locked before this game tips off or likely even has news. So the one guy who's kind of standing out to me is George Niang, just because he had been getting monster minutes the last 4 games. So I know he was disappointing from a fantasy perspective last game, but that might be a guy I'm looking at wanting to have if these guys are out. The only thing is that the rest of the team, it doesn't seem like there's anyone priced that you would really need them if these guys are all out. So is there anyone else that you want to save a spot for?
So I'm with you on the Yang. If guys are out, I think Korkmaz, Milton, if they're all out, start to look good as well. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the way that I'm viewing it is I know I'm going to get to Tobias Harris if he's still questionable going into the slate. And I'm going to get enough from like Portland and Sacramento, I think, at least from like I crunched lineups before the show and I was getting a good amount of, McCollum and Fox and some other guys from that game. So I think it's going to be easy enough for me to swap around. But yeah, it's pretty much, to me, I'm going to be getting to Harris and then I'll swap to some Niang, Korkmaz, Drummond if he gets ruled out.
Nice. On the Golden State side, we have Andre Iguodala out. Nothing really exciting there, but it looks like Gary Payton is back for this one. I saw that he has an 80% true shooting today. Like, did you realize that? That's insane.
Yeah, I knew it was something crazy. I mean, he scores at the rim a lot, but that's still pretty insane.
Yeah, I guess maybe he's at 77% this year, 84% last year. But this guy, Gary Payton, it might be the best NBA player that no one talks about, if that's the case. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of funny. But I mean, the guys that we're really looking at on this team are usually Steph, and then to a lesser extent, Poole, Green, and Wiggins. However, there's not much reason to be particularly excited about them tonight that I'm seeing. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I don't see a whole lot here. I mean, I think right now, at least with the lack of really cheap value and also the really strong mid-range we have, it's difficult for me to pay up a lot. I do think that amongst the really expensive options, Steph looks like one of the better ones. We have him as the second highest projected raw scorer on the slate. He's $800 less expensive than Giannis. And while I think 11.4 is pretty expensive for his average production, he still averaged 1.5 DraftKings points per minute this year. And we know that he has literal 80 plus fantasy point upside. So he shouldn't get much ownership here. If you can get him into some lineups, by all means, go for it. The guy that I was getting to the most before the show was Draymond Green, though, at 6,700. I think that he's kind of just like a middle of the road play for me, but it's just that he's not projected for much ownership. And I think that like 5,500 to 7K range at power forward looks pretty useful right now from a roster construction standpoint. So I like getting some Draymond as a contrarian piece in there.
Nice. All right, let's go to LA at Indiana. Now this one is earlier in the night, so fortunately we might have this news about LeBron and AD before the game, before lock, and that would be clutch because they're both questionable, and both of them are that'd be huge. However, the Lakers since last year have just labeled everyone questionable every night, basically. So it's really hard to believe that these guys are going to be out, especially since LeBron he missed last game due to suspension, not because of any injury. So, are you expecting both of them to play right now? And how are you gonna to approach this one?
Yeah, I'm expecting them to play. My concern is based on Frank Vogel's interview during the game last night. It seemed like Anthony Davis was legitimately sick. He had said during his interview in the first half that they were trying to play Davis in like 7-minute spurts and hope that at some point he started to feel better. So I could see a situation where like if LeBron's good to go today, they just rule out Davis, give him a couple days off. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But for now, until we hear otherwise, I'm just assuming that everybody plays.
Yeah, that's fair. That's kind of what I'm expecting too. But that's good to know that we'll have to look out for the Davis news. Since this is a 6 or 7 p.m. game, we'll know this before lock. We don't really have to worry a ton. But if Davis does miss this game, does that make anyone look like a pretty interesting option in fantasy?
So if Davis misses, then you should get more minutes in the front court, I would think, for the centers, like the actual centers, Jordan and Howard. Not necessarily enough to make them priorities, but they would look like decent values that open some stuff up. Carmelo Anthony would likely play more minutes. He's only 5K, so he would look decent. If both of LeBron and Davis were out, then I think Westbrook starts to look really good at 10-3. Horton Tucker would look really good at 5,500 in a good bounce back spot after he just was absolutely awful last night. So if only one of them is out, it's still tough for me to prioritize a lot here, although it would make a few guys look better. If Davis and James are out, that I think the Lakers start to really become a team that I get a lot of.
Now, one thing I'm wondering is if Davis is out, does that mean Dwight Howard and Jordan become plays? Because I know they play Davis as center a lot, and that's why Jordan and Howard don't play that much. But what would your read be?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would expect the case to be. DeAndre Jordan, for what it's worth, played 24 and a half minutes last night. Howard played 10. That was a lot for Jordan. Normally, when he starts, he still only plays 14 or 15. But like you were saying, you have typically when everybody's in, Davis is playing center. Last night with LeBron out, you saw some more minutes where Davis was playing the 4 as opposed to the 5. The actual centers got more minutes. So if Davis is out, I would expect a similar thing here where it may not end up being 24 minutes for Jordan and 10 for Howard. It could end up being, 15 apiece or something like that, or even, if Howard's playing really well, he gets more than Jordan. But the point being, there will be more minutes available for us to kind of roll the dice on those guys.
That kind of makes me want to play Dwight Howard if Davis is out because he's such a good per minute producer. But DeAndre Jordan would be appealing as well. Would they be some really good value plays then? If
I think the floor would still be non-existent, but or close to it. But I do think that they would look much better than they do, assuming that everybody's in.
Thanks to Jordan Lockhart for the super chat. He says, get the likes up. Huge slate equals big money. Thank you for the content and time you guys put in. And congrats to Jordan for all the takedowns recently. Let's get another one tonight. All right, on the Indiana side, we have Karis LeVert questionable. So if he's out, that could be a nice boost to some of the guys like Brogdon and maybe Duarte. The whole team seems to be like favorably priced tonight, with Brogdon coming in at 7,600 on DraftKings and 7,700 on FanDuel, while Sabonis is in the mid 8s. So do you like anyone right now? And if LeVert is out, then what would you think?
Yeah, I like the main 4 guys on Indiana: Sabonis, Brogdon, LeVert, and Turner. It's a situation where it seems like, the pricing algorithms on sites factor in recent playing time, and you've gotten some really weird minutes totals from these main guys on the Pacers, because 3 games ago they just got benched basically to start the second half, not long into the second half, and never came back. The bench went on a run. Then they've been involved in 2 massive blowouts since then. So you've kind of gotten the same rotation where they play like 2.5 quarters and just don't come back. There's no real reason that I've seen to think that if this game's competitive, you're not getting 33 to 35 minutes from Brogdon and Sabonis, around 30 minutes from LeVert and Turner. This is a really fast-paced Lakers team. They're not very good defensively. If Anthony Davis is out, it looks even better from that standpoint. So I think that, you would sort of seen these guys be a little bit overpriced because LeVert was out to start the season, then Brogdon was out. And so then when everybody came back, they were kind of just priced for somebody to be out. But now with these price tags dropping, Brogdon this year in the games he's played with Sabonis and LeVert is at about 1.09 DraftKings points per minute. Sabonis is at 1.2. LeVert has a 25% usage rate, which is the highest of the three. So I think, all three of those guys have nice ceilings for their salaries. And then we know Miles Turner gives you a ton of volatility because of his block upside. When he's not in foul trouble, he's been out there for 30, 31 minutes typically. So all four of ththose guys look good to me.
Nice. Yeah, it looks like DraftKings and FanDuel turned on their Black Friday pricing algorithm a little bit too early on the Pacers here. So I think you can play them all now. And then if LeVert is out, that could really elevate some of these guys into core play status. So that'll be one to look out for. Talking about Black Friday, we have a special which you should take advantage of. NFL Express Pass for only $1. That's with the promo code stuffing. So the Express packages include rankings, ownership rankings, and all the content, including projections and everything for NFL Showdown and single game. And there's an NBA package as well, but that's not in this particular promo. But it's only $1 to try for your first week. It's an even better value this week because we have basically 5 showdown slates instead of 3. So that's going to be really good value. So make sure to check that out. Maybe he's born with it. Maybe it's Awesemo Plus. All right, Charlotte at Orlando. This game is probably the game of the night from a DFS standpoint, although I don't think anyone is going to go nuts from a real basketball standpoint. But the Hornets got some intriguing players, starting with LaMelo Ball. He's really expensive on DraftKings at 10.7K, but on FanDuel 9,300, much more reasonably priced. Meanwhile, Miles Bridges has taken a step forward this year, and he's looking like maybe not a bad value on the sites. What are you seeing with the Hornets?
So LaMelo on FanDuel is cheap and I think a really good play. On DraftKings, if you can get to him in tournaments, he still gives you a high ceiling. It's a good matchup. Orlando's really bad defensively. They're middle of the pack in pace this year, but still a very high ceiling. It's more just a matter of can you get to that price tag. Bridges is pretty cheap. He's averaged about 37 minutes per game in the games he's played with Terry Rozier in the lineup this year, 1.04 DraftKings points per minute. One thing to keep an eye on is that PJ Washington's been upgraded to questionable here. I don't necessarily think that has an impact on Bridges, at least not yet, because I expect Washington to be limited. And we've also seen him used as the backup center this year, more so than taking minutes from Bridges. But that is one thing that, potentially could go wrong for Bridges, I guess. Ultimately, though, I think Bridges looks pretty good at 7,800. I don't mind, throwing some darts at these guys in tournaments, talking about like Oubre at 4,300, Cody Martin at 3,400, particularly if Washington is still out. But for me, I think the priorities are Bridges and LaMelo, particularly on FanDuel.
Nice. Yeah, I agree with that. Mason Plumlee is looking like a decent value play on DraftKings at 4,700, but not someone that has a lot of minutes upside from what we've seen. Now on the Orlando side, this is where it really gets interesting. Cole Anthony is out. But I think it's that plus the matchup versus Charlotte, where Orlando is actually only a 7-point underdog without Cole Anthony in this game. Cole Anthony has been pretty active, scoring, rebounding, and assisting. So it's kind of a bump to everyone. But let's start with the point guard, Jalen Suggs, who had a really rough game a couple of nights ago, but the whole team got absolutely smoked. What are you going to do with Suggs? Because he's one of the most popular plays tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going back to him. I think it's just a situation where you want, and this is always the case, pay attention to what your entire lineup looks like. You don't have to make a decision just looking at one player, especially on a slate this big. You don't have to just say, need to fade Jalen Suggs, he's too popular, or Wendell Carter, or whoever. You can still build contrarian lineups that have chalkier pieces in there, like Suggs. So Suggs does project as one of the best plays. And it really just comes down to, in some lineups where I have chalkier pieces elsewhere, I'm going to want to find pivots away from Jalen Suggs because of the ownership. But in other lineups where I already have some contrarian pieces in there, I still want Suggs because the upside's really high for him. He has a 27% usage rate without Cole Anthony on the floor this year, 22.5% assist percentage. He's likely to play, 30 minutes, give or take, assuming that this game stays somewhat close. It's a good matchup. Charlotte's bottom 10 in defensive rating, top 10 in pace this year. It's in Orlando, which helps a little bit in terms of it hopefully being more competitive. They're still blowout concerns. Orlando has been absolute garbage without Cole Anthony on the floor this year, but it's a 7-point spread. If you take every 7-point spread and just start like assuming it's not going to stay close, you're going to run out of players pretty quickly on a lot of slates. So I think that Suggs and a lot of these Orlando guys look good. It really just comes down to your roster construction and making sure that, where you do go to these guys, you're offsetting that with some contrarian plays elsewhere.
Definitely. Yeah. I think a lot of the Orlando guys are going to be kind of the chalk tonight. 3 of the top 5 players in our ownership are from the Magic, and that's because they're just insanely cheap for the minutes. Suggs is probably the best example because he's not only cheap, but he's getting a big boost in per minute rates with Anthony out, most likely. I also want to mention Gary Harris is questionable. If he's out, that probably just means Michael Mulder plays more. I don't see it being a huge fantasy factor, but Mulder could be interesting at the near min price. But the rest of the starters and some of the bench are pretty appealing. Wagner at 3,900. Wendell Carter at 5,500 and Mo Bamba at 6,400. All of them show as really positive values tonight. So is there anyone you don't like, or are these all core plays in your lineups?
No, they're all core plays. I mean, they're all getting ownership, but I just think it's well deserved. Bamba is 6,400, which is just a crazy cheap price tag. He's averaging over 3 blocks per 100 possessions this year. He's averaging like a steal and a half per 100 possessions as well. So just crazy defensive upside on top of being a good rebounder and likely playing around 30 minutes if this game's close. Wendell Carter Jr. is at about 1.1 DraftKings points per minute this year. He'll probably play about 30 minutes if this game's close as well. Even in the last game where they got blown out, he played 27.6 minutes in 3 quarters. So, I mean, the pricing on these guys is just at a point where, yeah, they're popular, but they can really just, it's very easy to see out. As long as this game goes 4 quarters, they can just absolutely ruin your night if you don't have them. So it's not really a situation where I'm comfortable just getting away from them completely. It's more so just wanting to, pay attention to the rest of your lineup. But you mentioned the guys off the bench. That's one way you can do this as well. Not saying that like I'm prioritizing RJ Hampton over Jalen Suggs or anything, but Hampton projected for about 1% ownership right now compared to 33% for Suggs. That's certainly one example where if you need someone in that price range, but you have chalkier pieces elsewhere, you can play Hampton. He played about 11 minutes in the first half last game. If this game's competitive, I'd expect him to play 22 to 24. But if he's playing well or if it blows out, there's a path to more minutes for him. You have a cheap Terrence Ross at 3,600. You have Chuma Okeke at 4K, who's likely to play mid-20s in minutes. So those guys, Hampton and Okeke in particular, but also Ross, they don't look as good as the other 4 in terms of their chances of success, but they're also not getting nearly as much ownership.
Definitely. Yeah. I think there's some interesting correlations maybe between these guys. Maybe the bench plays well, they get more minutes, or blowout situation. Tough to really make that a huge part of your night, but interesting to talk about. Wagner looks particularly appealing to me at 3,900. That's showing up as almost 7 points above 5x value. So I don't really have any particular reason to like him other than that price, but that does stand out a lot. What do you think?
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. It doesn't feel great playing a popular Franz Wagner, but he's $3,900. He's averaged 0.76 DraftKings points per minute so far this year. And assuming Orlando's able to stay in this game, he's going to play around 30 minutes. So there's just no, especially right now, there's not like a lot of alternatives in terms of value on this slate. Maybe things change and you get some lower owned pieces around 3,900 that look similar. But right now, they just sort of project as the best value options because they're pretty much $1,000 too cheap across the board.
Let's talk groups for a second. I know some guys like to make rules. They don't want certain guys in a lineup with each other. However, on the Magic, I don't really see that being a huge factor. But what's more pertinent to me is the number of players from this team that you're going to want to have in one particular lineup. So, do you set rules about how many players per team you're willing to have in the same lineup?
Yeah, I was kind of going back and forth earlier, thinking about if I wanted to set it at 3 or 4. Because I think this is kind of tough because on the one hand, they project as the best values, but on the other hand, there's 12 other games on the slate, and I don't really want to allocate 4 roster spots to the Orlando Magic. So I've kind of been thinking I'm either going to go max 3, or if I set max 4, do something where like if I have 4 guys from Orlando, I need one of like LaMelo or Bridges or something where I'm just saying like, okay, this game ends up being really high scoring and both sides go off and kind of just turn it into like a game stack.
Nice, man. Yeah, I agree with the 3 limit. Okay, we have the news. Gary Harris is in tonight and starting. So it's good to know. Besides that, Suggs at point guard is the usual starters. So that was kind of nice that we get that news now. I agree with on a 12 or 13 game slate. I'm probably going to limit it to 2 on a regular team, but when you take a team that has as much value as the Magic do on DraftKings tonight, then 3 is acceptable.
Yeah, my plan right now was 2 on every team except Orlando.
Nice. Yeah, I'm down with that. All right, Miami in Minnesota. Miami's a 1-point favorite on the road. We got pretty much a full crew for the Heat. So I don't really see anyone popping out from a value perspective, but I mean it's a good team. So I know Tyler Hero had a crazy good night against the Pistons last night, but I don't see any of these guys as really good DFS plays tonight. What do you see?
Yeah, I don't see a ton here either. I think they're just correctly priced. Adebayo would be the guy I got to first at 8,400, but he's a center and there's a ton of good center options. Jimmy Butler's priced up to 10K. That's a pretty tough sell for me. Lowry is relatively expensive. Hero can obviously light it up, but so can a lot of people on this slate that are less expensive. So I don't really see much here, but I would guess that Bam's the guy I get to the most if I get to anybody.
Nice. All right, well, let's move on then. So we can talk about every team. Minnesota, Josh Koji is questionable. This is the news we're all waiting for tonight. But we have some pretty decent prices. I know Anthony Edwards might be popular at 7,400, and then Towns at 9,400. He's been towards 10K before, and Russell also reasonably priced. Is there anyone that you're liking tonight?
Yeah, I'm getting to a scary amount of Minnesota considering that it's a pretty tough matchup against Miami, but I just think there's really favorable pricing here. D'Angelo Russell in particular, $7,300. Guard eligible at both guard spots on DraftKings. In the 9 games since he came back from injury, he's averaging 1.15 DraftKings points per minute, about 33 minutes per game. That just grades out well, even in a tough matchup at 7,300. Towns is cheap at 9,400. The opportunity cost is what keeps me from getting more of him. But, if you can build a good lineup that has Towns, then by all means go there. Edwards, I think, gets in a good amount of lineups just because he's guard and forward eligible. His usage rate has been dropping a bit, which is to be expected with D'Angelo Russell playing more minutes. But I think it's offset, at least from a ceiling standpoint, by the fact that Edwards can play, 38 minutes in competitive games. So, and, if his shot's falling, he'll shoot more. So I think he becomes a little bit riskier, now that Russell is back. You're not getting the consistent 30% usage rate every single night, but he's not really priced for you to need that either. And then Patrick Beverley at 5,100 is still a decent contrarian value as well. He's one of those guys, like, for example, I think Jalen Suggs at 4,800 is clearly the better play. But if I already have a bunch of popular guys in my lineup and I need to fill it out with someone in there, Beverly's fine as, an ownership discount.
We got a alert that Darius Garland is game time decision tonight. So that would be big for Rubio if he happened to miss tonight. Minnesota is a 1-point favorite in this game over Miami. Is that surprising to you at all, or is Minnesota just a better team this year?
It's kind of surprising to me. I mean, it is a back-to-back for Miami on the road.
Yeah, definitely. But that still seems like a number that the chat was surprised about, and I'm kind of agreeing. All right. Washington at New Orleans. Washington, we the no one injured of note, but Davis Bertans is expected back for this one, not on an injury report. I don't really see that being a huge factor in DFS. So let's talk about the rest of the guys. I mean, I think you can only really play the starters on this team, but no one's really jumping out price wise. Maybe Kuzma at 6,400, but what do you think?
Yeah, nothing really jumps out to me either. The centers are typically the first guys I get to here, but there's a million good center plays tonight. Bradley Beal at 9,300 is okay, but there's other guards that I like more. There's other pay up options I like more. So, yeah, I'm with you. Not a whole lot standing out here. Just they're pretty correctly priced as long as both of Dinwiddie and Beal are playing, which they are tonight.
Yeah, agreed. So a little bit tougher to get to. I agree. The centers, Gafford and Harrell are pretty appealing. Harrell always gets the bigger share, but the last two games, his minutes have been a little bit disappointing. So, on New Orleans, we have Devontae Graham questionable, game time decision for this one. So, if he is back for this, maybe that would cut into a little bit of production. But I mean, Brandon Ingram is sub 8K. That's pretty appealing. And Joval is only 8,000 on FanDuel, so I know he's going to be super popular on FanDuel. How are you feeling about Ingram and Joval tonight?
Yeah, those are the two that stand out to me. Ingram, certainly hasn't been great this season. He's averaged 1.05 DraftKings points per minute, but he's likely to play 37 plus minutes if this game's close. He still has a 30.3% usage rate, and he's guard and forward eligible on DraftKings, which just makes it easier to get him into lineups as well. And then Valanciunas, like you said, a very good price point on FanDuel, but even 8,900 on DraftKings has come down a little bit from where he was without Ingram. He's averaged 1.25 DraftKings points per minute in the games Ingram has played this year. That's down from 1.37 without Ingram. His usage rate is down a few points. His rebounding percentage and his assist percentage are as well. But 1.25 fantasy points per minute is still very, very good production, especially when it's someone who's likely to play 33 plus minutes in competitive games. So, a lot of opportunity cost again at the position, but Valanciunas does look like one of the higher upside guys there, I think.
Yeah, the price tag of 8K on FanDuel is pretty appealing. Now, if Devontae Graham missed this game, do you think that gives anyone enough of a boost to make it in your lineups? I saw Kira Lewis played 27 minutes last game, which seems a little fluky because Satoransky got the start and didn't play very much. So, but how are you looking at those two?
Yeah, last game was weird. It's hard to take a lot away from that because, like you said, Satoransky only played 12.9 minutes. Kira Lewis played 32. It would create a situation where you're, in large field tournaments, if you're playing 150 lineups, mixing in a little bit of Kira Lewis or Satoransky makes some sense because they're both essentially minimum salary, and we don't have a lot of minimum priced guys that have ceilings on this slate. But they still wouldn't be priorities because it's just a difficult situation to feel confident in their minutes. You also have Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who came off the bench last game, still ended up playing 27 minutes. So, there's a lot of ways in a competitive game that closing lineup can look as well. You don't even have to have Satoransky or Kira Lewis necessarily closing. You could go, Alexander Walker, Temple, Hart, Ingram, Joval, or something like that. So it's not even like it's a guaranteed 48-minute split.
I know that people are going to be, why didn't you talk about Willie Hernan Gomez? He got 19 points and 10 other stats last game. So any love for Hernan Gomez?
If you have Joval getting in massive foul trouble and playing 19 minutes, then yeah. Nice. I personally don't.
Yeah, I think backup centers are always like a little bit high upside.
Yeah,
but not on a 13 game slate.
He's not even that cheap either. It would be different if you were 3,400, but he's 4,300. So you really probably need him to play 24 minutes here.
Nice. Guys, if you haven't checked out our sponsor Prize Picks, make sure to go over there and try their daily prop-based contests. You can use the promo code Awesemo for $100 first match bonus. Now, the nice thing about Prize Picks is you can do prop parlays and win up to 10x your stake. And you can do it across a ton of different sports. I mostly have been doing football and basketball, and we have all the projections on our site to help with these Prize Picks plays. So basically you can pick 2 to 5 different props. The one that really stood out to me is Jalen Suggs. His over under today on Prize Picks is only 11.5. Now, with Cole Anthony out, there aren't too many guys that can get unassisted buckets on the Magic. So I'm expecting Jalen Suggs to get a lot of usage today. Will he be able to make the buckets? That's the question. But I have him projected for like 15.5 points. So 11.5 line seems kind of fluky. I don't know. Am I too aggressive on Jalen Suggs points? And what props are you looking at tonight?
No, I'm with you on Suggs, and on the same team, Wendell Carter Jr. also an 11.5 point prop. Same situation. I mean, he's likely to play close to 30 minutes at least if this game's competitive. It's a pretty weak Charlotte front court. It's a weak Charlotte defense in general. Wendell Carter Jr. I think projects for several points more than 11.5.
Nice. I'm curious if they let you do the same game, guys. Let me try that right now. But it's kind of fun. You can either choose for the 2 props to get 3x if you get both of them right, or you can get 2x if you get it right, and 0.5 if you only get one of the 2. So it's kind of a different way to bet some props. All right. It does let you parlay these. So that's kind of a difference between this and other books, but it says you need at least 2 different teams, so you might have to add a 3rd prop in there. All right, let's move on to Toronto at Memphis. Toronto is a 3-point favorite. Been a little bit impressive this year after losing some of their key guys, but tonight they have a few questionables. OG Anunoby maybe coming back from injury. Ken Birch and Precious Achua are both questionable as well. So a little bit tough to know exactly what to do with OG Anunoby being such a big question mark, but the guys seem to be pretty favorably priced to begin with. So what are you seeing on Toronto?
So I think Fred VanVleet at 7,800 is a pretty solid option regardless of Anunoby. I don't think that Anunoby is going to really affect his usage. Like he's going to be around 23% or so one way or the other. He's likely to play 37, 38 minutes like he normally does. And 7,800 is just a pretty favorable price tag. I think 8,100 for Siakam looks pretty good as well. Just a little bit cheaper than we normally get him at. I think the biggest impact Anunoby has for me is probably on Scotty Barnes, who at 6,600 I think is a reasonable play. Even if Anunoby's in, I think he's reasonable. Like it's not like that's really expensive. But if Anunoby's out, I would like Barnes more because it does open up a little bit more usage that is likely to go to Barnes. There's more rebounding opportunities potentially. So Barnes is the one that I think I would like. I think there's the biggest gap, I guess, in how I feel about him with Anunoby in and out on Barnes. But I think VanVleet, Siakam, Barnes are all fine either way.
Yeah, I agree. I think that VanVleet very well priced tonight on DraftKings at 7,800. Now, if Anunoby is out, I feel like he has a 22% usage, doesn't really get a ton in the other categories. So it's hard to get excited about anyone else except for the minutes. But that's been huge because we've been seeing when Anunoby's been out, they've been starting Birch or Chua at center. I guess it's been Birch all 3 games, but mostly because Achua is coming back from injury. If Anunoby's out again, would you want the starting center for Toronto?
So, both starting centers are questionable too. So that's a good question. But it would be, I wouldn't say priorities. I mean, if Anunoby's out and let's say Achua and Birch are in and Birch starts, 3,800 for Birch would look okay, but it's still just a position where I think that there's a lot of upside in the mid range. So I don't think I would be looking to pay down there all that often. Same can be said for Achua. He's a good fantasy producer on a per minute basis. If he were in and both Anunoby and Birch were out, then potentially you're looking at a lot of minutes for him. But I still think it's just kind of tough to look to either of them unless you have a situation where Anunoby, where like 2 of the 3 are out.
Yeah, it's not even like you can put in Achua and then late swap if he's out, because if both of them are in, that's not that exciting. But that's definitely a spot we're going to continue monitoring. On the Memphis side, Melton continues to be out. Dylan Brooks said he's going to play tonight, but technically is listed as questionable. Some decent pricing on these guys, especially Steven Adams at 4,400 is very favorably priced. Matchup, not not one that I feel extremely confident in for Adams, but Jaren Jackson's kind of a DFS player's favorite. He's only 6,300, and then Dylan Brooks himself is pretty cheap at 5,700. So, who are the guys on Memphis you're most excited about tonight?
So I think Jackson's price tag at 6,300 looks good. I don't totally think he should be as popular as we have him projected to be. We have him at 15% right now, which, like, I get it. 6,300 looks good and everybody likes rostering Jaren Jackson, but he played 34 minutes last game. Brooks was out. That was the first time he's exceeded 30 minutes in any of his previous 6 or 7 games. You've not only does he deal with foul trouble frequently, but in most games this year where he's avoided foul trouble, he's still only played about 30 minutes. He's a little over a 1 fantasy point per minute guy. I think that he has a ceiling, but I think that it's kind of offset right now by how much ownership he's getting. I kind of mentioned earlier when we talked about Golden State that I was getting a good amount of Draymond Green. I think that's in part because of Jackson's ownership. I'm kind of just pivoting to Green at a similar price point. There's some other guys, Scotty Barnes, that you could potentially pivot to as well. So I think Jackson's fine, but I would like to see that ownership come down a little bit. Brooks coming back has a negative impact on, I think, most guys with Memphis. Desmond Bane has been a good player and a relatively high usage guy this year, but in the games Brooks has played, you're talking about around a 17% usage rate. John Morant goes from about 32 or 33% down to 28%. So it makes it a little more difficult to get to those guys. I'm with you. Steven Adams at 4,400 certainly is just cheap. He's not particularly likely to break the slate, but if he happens to get 26 plus minutes, he probably does fine for that salary. Brandon Clark has been in the rotation. He played a lot of minutes last game, played like 26 minutes. I don't know exactly how much he ends up being impacted by Brooks being back. You could certainly see, Kyle Anderson moving to the bench and cutting into some of those minutes potentially. So I think Clark is risky, but at 3,500, I do think there's still some value there.
Nice. Yeah, I've noticed that Xavier Tillman hasn't been in the rotation a while, so that's really benefited Clark when they moved Jackson up to center and he plays power forward.
Yeah.
LeBron is in. Karis LeVert has a minutes limit today, so I'm like really skeptical of that report. Like,
hasn't he had a minutes limit pretty much every single game he's played?
Exactly. It's like I guess in the past week he hasn't played as many minutes, but
none of their guys have.
Yeah, yeah. He's averaged a little bit around 24, 25 this year, I guess. Or wait, no, sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but he hasn't been playing a ton of minutes is what I'm saying. And
Right.
If he's limited to 30, I mean, that's pretty much the cap on a regular day.
Yeah, like it would be weird if they're like, yeah, he's going to play, but he's only playing 18 minutes or 22 minutes. And if he's limited to 28 to 30, that's what he's playing anyway.
All right, we got Davis. Anthony Davis is unlikely to play today. So that does seem like obviously really significant information. So let's go back to the Lakers. What's your instant reaction here?
Yeah, so instant reaction is that it makes, we had talked about those centers. With LeBron in, it doesn't make them like must plays. I feel like I think you could still see potentially small lineups from the Lakers, but it does make them look better. Like there's certainly a path to them getting more minutes. You do have a relatively big front court in Indiana as well, which is nice. It also means that there's more minutes available for Carmelo. I'm trying to pull up the Lakers numbers now to see what we have with Anthony Davis off the floor because I don't think he's missed an entire game yet this year, but LeBron's played 77 minutes without him on the floor, 1.42 DraftKings points per minute. Westbrook's at 1.32. I mean, it's going to make LeBron and Westbrook look a little bit better than if he were in. I don't think it's necessarily quite enough to elevate them to like must plays or anything like that, but certainly more playable than they would have been if all 3 guys were in.
Yeah. So what our model is showing here is we have DeAndre Jordan and Dwight Howard as really good values if you assume that each play about 23 minutes. Now, do you have a lean that one would play more than the other, first of all?
I would lean toward Jordan just because I'm assuming he's going to start, and Howard hasn't really played a lot this season. But I'm not super confident in that either. Like I would be more comfortable with Howard if he had been playing like more than 10 to 13 minutes most nights.
Yeah, that's interesting because last year Howard, I feel like was really the preferred option.
Right.
So I don't really have much of a read on this one. Um, but I do know that you can't really go wrong playing one of the two. So uh, I think I might just have pretty good exposure to both. I'm updating the projections right now, but it looks like DeAndre Jordan, we have 22 projected points at 3K, so 7.5 points above 5X, while Howard is 7 points above 5X. So both very good values. Let's go back to the breakdown here. So we one thing to note, this didn't really impact LeBron and Russell Westbrook's projections as much as I thought, because I mean, I just feel like the fit there is so bad, and they both score in exactly the same ways that I feel like AD being out is going to kind of distribute more evenly among the rest of the team compared to what you might expect. So I don't know, like are LeBron and Westbrook guys you're looking at now?
I mean, more so than I was before, just because they still have high ceilings, and now there's one less guy they have to share the ball with. But I'm with you. I mean, it's just a really weird fit, and Davis being out doesn't make it any less weird. So it's two ball dominant guys that can't really shoot, and yeah, it's still not a spot where I'm really confident in either one. I do think they look a little bit better now, but like I think if LeBron and Davis had both been out, Westbrook would be one of the best plays on the slate. It's certainly not that type of thing with LeBron in.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this one, it's it's not as exciting as I was anticipating. I think a lot of people are going to look at Anthony Davis being out and be like, okay, I'm going to get Westbrook and I'm going to get LeBron. But in this particular instance, I feel like that might be the wrong conclusion. So
My conclusion is I want more Sabonis.
Nice. Just because, I mean, he's going to have a better matchup.
Yeah, I mean, not having Anthony Davis in that front court and ending up with some combination of Jordan, Howard, Melo is pretty nice.
Nice. All right, let's go to Portland at Sacramento. Portland, pretty fairly priced today. So it looks like CJ McCollum at 7,600 on DraftKings, 7,500 on FanDuel is a plus value. Damian Lillard has been having a really shaky season, but he's cheap on FanDuel. And then the rest of the guys is kind of like not like anyone that really stands out, but they all look acceptable. What are you seeing?
From the rest of Memphis?
Portland.
Sorry. Oh, Portland. Okay, yeah. So I think McCollum looks good on DraftKings. 7,600 is just a good salary there. But I'm with you. Like, I don't think that a whole lot stands out. Lillard, we know, has a ceiling, but he's 9,700 on DraftKings. There's some other guys that I like there. The $6,200 salary on Nurkic is always kind of tempting, but it's been long enough now of him just not playing enough minutes that I think that's difficult to get to. So McCollum, who's averaging over a fantasy point per minute, likely to play 37 to 38 minutes here, I think looks like the best option.
Nice. I agree with that. On the Sacramento side, with Luke Walton out, they started Mo Harkless instead of Mezi Metu. And in fact, Metu was out of the rotation completely, which kind of bailed me out because I bet some of the props. And I was hoping, like, oh my God, I hope he doesn't come in for garbage time. So that was kind of fun. But with Metu out of the rotation, we saw Buddy Hield play a lot more. It seemed like maybe he was someone that got on the coach's bad side for whatever reason, but I feel like the organization invested a lot in Buddy Hield. So I'm kind of wondering if the coaching change will benefit him. What's your read on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible. Harkless also, so Harkless also got in some foul trouble early in the third quarter, and that's when Hield subbed in. Harkless only played a minute and 46 seconds and picked up his fourth foul. So I think it's kind of the same situation for Hield, where some nights he's going to get 30 to 32, other nights he's going to get 26, 27, kind of depending on how the game's going and how he's playing. It certainly still makes him a pretty appealing tournament option at 5,600. I mean, we know he's somebody that can, go out there and light it up off the bench.
Yeah, I think he's kind of interesting. Harrison Barnes, he's only 6,200 on FanDuel, or sorry, on DraftKings. That really seems like they're doing him dirty because he's really kind of taken a step forward this year, it feels like, in fantasy. Do you think that's too low a price for Harrison Barnes?
Yeah, I do. I mean, he's giving you 36, 37 minutes most nights in competitive games. He's been around the fantasy point per minute guy. Anytime someone, just basically back of the napkin math projects for 6x, it's pretty safe to say that he's fairly priced or underpriced.
Nice. Then Halliburton, also a pretty reasonable value on DraftKings. And then Fox on FanDuel 7,300. That's the better price for him. Let's go to Atlanta at San Antonio. Atlanta is a 4-point favorite. They have Hunter. He's out for a while. So you've been seeing Bogdanovich and Herter get the start. No one's really jumping out from a value perspective to me, but I mean, everyone looks playable. What do you think?
That's how I see it too. San Antonio is actually playing at a fast pace this year, but assuming everyone's in for Atlanta, nobody jumps out. I think that Capella is a good tournament play. I think Collins is a good tournament play. Nothing's wrong with Trae Young or Kevin Herter, but it's just a team that is essentially healthy and priced correctly on a slate where there's a lot of, or at least a decent amount of injuries and mispriced guys.
Nice. Well, with that in mind, we can go to San Antonio because we're running a little bit short on time. San Antonio, Doug McDermott is questionable for this one when he missed the game last time. We were kind of expecting Lonnie Walker to get the start. However, Keita Bates-Diop kind of came out of nowhere to get the start. Classic pop, right? So if McDermott's out again, do you see that benefiting anyone?
So I think that it's beneficial in the sense that there's still more minutes available. Like Lonnie Walker still closed that game, played 22 minutes. Devin Vassell played 30 minutes. You also got 39 and a half minutes from Derek White, which is out of the norm. He's averaged about 29 and a half minutes per game this year. So if McDermott's out, I don't think there's necessarily one person that you can point to that say like they definitely play more minutes. But I think just the fact that those minutes are available increases the ceiling, gives a little bit of favorable, volatility to guys like Vassell, White, and Lonnie Walker.
Agreed. Yeah, Vassell looks like he got a pretty good chunk of minutes last game. Keldon Johnson for a little stretch was playing like almost 36 minutes a game, but that's kind of simmered down. So he looks like he got a couple more minutes maybe, but Derek White does look like a really good value at 5,300 on DraftKings, 5,500 on FanDuel, and Keldon Johnson is quite cheap as well. So I think those are pretty good options.
Yeah, Pirtle's my favorite guy here.
Are you expecting? I mean, he's been back 2 games, so in the last game it looked like he played his normal minutes. Or are you expecting him to average more than he played the last game, which was about 27 minutes?
He played 31 last game. Unless
sorry, yeah, I'm looking at the wrong number here.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, I mean, he's averaged like 30 and a half minutes per game as a starter this year. Went from 15 off the bench 2 games ago to 31.2 last game. So I don't really see any reason to think he's limited here. He's over a fantasy point per minute guy at only 5,700 on DraftKings. So I think he looks really good. And DeJounte Murray is one of my favorite pay up options at 9,600. Atlanta's been bad defensively this year. Murray's about a 1.3 fantasy point per minute guy. So both of those guys look really good to me.
Yeah, it's always interesting, like on DraftKings because they priced up everyone so high that I mean Murray on a normal year like 9,600 for him would be outrageous, but now even though he's less than 5x, that looks like one of the better values. So, let's talk a little bit about our packages. So we have a lot of tools behind the paywall to help you out. We have the full site access, $29.95 a week. You can get the NBA specific package for less, and we have the Express for a budget. But the main thing here is there's so many tools to add to your arsenal. I mean, you got projections, ownership. We're working overtime to make these as accurate as possible because we're putting a ton of money on them ourselves to back it up. So one of the things that's kind of been a focus the last couple of years is really getting the probabilities down. Because with NBA, it's kind of like you need every player to go off. So it's kind of like a parlay of 8 players. So we have the probability that we think each player individually is going to succeed on the slate. And it's represented in two ways: the boom percentage, which is the chance that they're going to get 10 points above value for that day, and the optimal lineup percentage. You don't need the optimal lineup to win usually, but that's a great reference point compared to the ownership. So guys, make sure to sign up and take advantage of these tools. All right, Chicago is a big favorite at Houston, and we get the news Alex Caruso is playing tonight. I know you guys are on the edges of your seats, but no one in Chicago is injured. In fact, Vucevic is returning from injury, but he's on a minutes limit, so I don't really see that moving the needle a ton, except maybe removing Bradley out of DFS contention. Do you think Vucevic coming back affects the team a lot?
Not a ton. I mean, I think it takes a little bit of usage on average away from guys like Levine and DeRozan. And I think, that kind of goes without saying because Vooch is a higher usage guy than Tony Bradley. But even before he got COVID, you saw Vooch sort of have a smaller role offensively than at least I expected coming into the season. And you still saw Levine and DeRozan, flirting with 30% usage rates. So I think it's kind of just the same situation with Chicago where it's really difficult to pinpoint, who out of this group is going to have a big game. You also have Kobe White potentially, playing some minutes alongside them and taking some usage. But it also is a situation where it makes it so the median projections aren't that great. You have 5% projected ownership going to a 9K Levine against Houston, 5% projected going to DeRozan against Houston. I mean, this is still a very favorable matchup against one of the fastest and worst teams in the NBA. I think it's pretty appealing looking to guys like Levine at low ownership in tournaments.
Nice. Yeah, I think that Levine, man, his price is up there, but on FanDuel at 8K, that would be the site that I play more on. But I think that the matchup you gotta feel pretty encouraged about. On the Houston side, Kevin Porter is questionable for about the fifth straight slate. When he's been out, you've had Eric Gordon get the start and Jalen Green kind of get a bump because he's the point guard in the lineup instead of Porter. So is Green someone you're gonna want to get in the case that Porter is ruled out?
I mean, yeah, he would look better. For what it's worth, Porter said yesterday that he's playing today. So, I guess take that for what it's worth, but I'm assuming he's going to play. But either way,
yeah, that's usually pretty reliable.
Yeah. Either way, I think that Jalen Green at worst is a reasonable tournament option. Houston's just one of these teams where it's really difficult to feel confident in going to them because they are just absolutely horrible and they get blown out so often that you end up getting, shortened minutes. But on the other hand, the games that they are competitive in, they run a pretty tight rotation with their main guys playing a lot of minutes. And so it's a situation where, if Jalen Green plays well, there's a better chance the game is close and he plays more minutes. Same goes for Christian Wood. Same goes for Porter and Tate, even Şengün at 4,300. So this is a team where I don't think they're necessary in cash. I'm not super confident in any of them, but I do think that there's plenty of upside at these price tags.
Definitely. Yeah. Jalen Green is someone I'm kind of intrigued by. Şengün, he was really popular on FanDuel the other night. I think he was like 30% owned or something like crazy, but his points per minute are above 1. And with Tice being the starter, he often gets all the backup minutes at center. So that's the guy that kind of surprises me when he ends up in my lineups, but I kind of dig it. All right, Utah at OKC. Utah, obviously a big favorite here, but they got the full squad tonight. So one guy that kind of stands out from a value perspective, perhaps, is Rudy Gay. He's 3,300, and he's been someone that's been getting some love from the coaching staff. So is he someone you take a flyer on, or is that just not enough upside?
No, I mean, I think Rudy Gay is kind of interesting here. I'm not sure how necessary he'll end up being now that we've gotten, Anthony Davis unlikely to play. You have some cheap guys there. But the reason I think Rudy Gay is kind of interesting is he's been playing around 18 minutes since he came back. But he's a good fantasy point per minute guy and really always has been. And then there's no, there's no guarantee he just plays 18 minutes every single game. At some point, probably without any sort of announcement, you're just going to get like 22 minutes from Rudy Gay randomly, and he's going to look really good. So as long as the ownership's low, I don't mind taking some shots there, especially against a team as bad as OKC. But, it is what it is. It's not somebody that's likely to go get you 30 or 40 fantasy points today, but he is likely to, give you good production for his salary.
Nice. Yeah, he's someone that I think could sneak into some lineups for me, but I don't feel great about it. What about the rest of Utah? Is there anyone you're going to be looking at?
I think Mitchell looks pretty good at 8,300. He is likely to play 32, 33 minutes, but he's also close to a 1.3 fantasy point per minute guy in a good matchup here. Rudy Gobert has a massive ceiling as well, although, there's a lot of good centers. So I kind of, Utah is one of those teams where I think there's you could make a case for pretty much any of their main rotation guys being in any particular lineup, but I don't think it's likely that I end up with a lot of any of these guys.
All right, we got the news from Boston. It looks like Robert Williams was telling the truth. Robert Williams himself is out, and Josh Richardson is also out. So that makes me kind of like Horford more. He's someone that got more minutes at center, and in general, with Robert Williams out for that 3-game stretch, because he's backed up by Enes Kanter, who the coaching staff doesn't really believe in his defense at all. That seems like a situation where he's going to benefit a lot. Who else are you going to be looking at on Boston?
So it makes me like Horford more. I think you can get a couple more minutes for him there. Kanter at 3,300, potentially plays like 14 to 16 minutes, maybe. Probably not anything you need, but maybe like if for example DeAndre Jordan starts to get a bunch of ownership, Kanter would be somebody you could use at lower ownership. I think the biggest beneficiary I think is Horford. Grant Williams most likely slides into the starting lineup at 3,800. That's okay, but nothing crazy. The big piece is still, I think, waiting on Jaylen Brown, because if he's out, it's going to make Dennis Schroeder look pretty good at 6,400.
Good point. Yeah, they did mention that he's a game time decision for injury management. So I don't know why you need to make that a game time decision, but
Right.
That's where we're at. Okay, so we covered Utah. Let's go to OKC. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is out. So I think our buddy Jesse was calling us out for our love of Josh Giddey with Shai out, but I'm kind of digging him again tonight. Maybe I'm a fish. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I still think he looks good here. I don't like him as much as I did the other day because the salaries come up $600 on DraftKings, and he's facing the Utah Jazz, which is one of the least appealing matchups you can get to. But still going to have plenty of assist opportunities. Still likely, if OKC can keep this game relatively close, which is a big if. Still, likely to play a good amount of minutes. He played 31 minutes last game. I think around 30 minutes is a reasonable expectation here. But he rebounds. He leads the team in assist percentage anyway. Now you take out SGA. He's going to get a little bit of a usage bump as well. So I'm not super confident in him because of the matchup. OKC only has a 97-point implied total right now, but still a reasonable option. And I think the first guy I'd get to from the Thunder.
Yeah, he's kind of the guy I'm keying in on, but there's some other guys that are interesting. What the Thunder did last game was really peculiar. They started Baisley at the 3, Jeremiah Robinson and Earl at the 4, and Favors at the 5. These are guys that all played center or like play center from time to time at least. Baisley usually plays power forward, but last year. But as a result, Baisley got a lot of minutes. Jeremiah Robinson, Earl got more minutes than he usually plays. Do you see them starting that big lineup today, and how does that affect things?
Yeah, I think they could. It's not. Utah doesn't have as big a front court as Atlanta does, but at the same time, Royce O'Neal doesn't do anything on offense, so probably doesn't matter too much. My guess would be that they go smaller just because of the matchup, but it's always really difficult to be confident in a team like OKC because they don't care at all about winning. They have a bunch of guys who play the same positions and all pretty much suck. So I wouldn't be surprised if you got Kenrich Williams in there, but I'm not super confident in that either.
Thanks, Corey, for the super chat. He says, will Aldridge get run tonight? Is he worth a try on DK? My general feeling, I think we're kind of on opposite sides of this one. I feel like since Blake Griffin didn't play the second half last game, that's kind of why LaMarcus Aldridge got a lot more minutes, and he had a huge game, of course, but that could easily just go back to his low 20s. That he usually plays. So I'm not really excited about Aldridge tonight. What's your general feeling?
Yeah, I'm kind of on the fence about him. He started the second half last game, started the second half, played a bunch in the second half, but at the same time, he has been much better than Griffin this year. And he's played 30 minutes now in 2 of his last 3. So from a conditioning standpoint, I'm not really worried about it. If he were to start, I think he plays 30 minutes. If he comes off the bench, I think it's a situation where he is likely to play around 24, but there's certainly the path to him getting more again. So I think he's still a high upside tournament play, but the range of outcomes is pretty wide. So in tournaments, yeah, I think he's fine. I don't think he's any sort of a priority. If he starts, he looks a lot better.
Definitely. On the last game, Phoenix at Cleveland, Abdel Nader has been ruled out, so make sure to get him out of your lineups. But more seriously, like a team that Cleveland's actually been pretty decent, and the pricing on these guys doesn't seem that exciting. What are you thinking with Phoenix?
Yeah, not a whole lot that stands out in terms of priorities for me. I think that 7,400 on DeAndre Ayton is a good salary, but I mean, even at that literal price point on DraftKings, you also have Clint Capella, you also have Jared Allen, just a lot of guys that look about the same and that don't really stand out. Chris Paul, Devin Booker both give you ceilings as well, but just a healthy team that's priced pretty much correctly.
Nice. On Cleveland, we saw Jared Allen and Markkanen come back last game and actually had pretty good minutes and performance. So I'm just playing them as if things are back to normal here. Meanwhile, Chetty Osman is probable for this one, so that's one more guy. Darius Garland is a game time decision. That's kind of a piece of news that could really shift the pecking order on this slate, where I feel like Rubio would be a lock if Garland misses, if Rubio is ever a lock. But what are you looking at on the Cleveland side?
So one of Cleveland's beat reporters tweeted a couple of minutes ago that nothing official yet, but that the sense he's getting and what he's hearing is that Garland is likely to play. So, take that for what it's worth. But I agree with you. If he's out, Rubio would look really good. If he's in, it's more difficult to get the Rubio, who only played 30 minutes last game. Garland himself played 38 minutes, 7,500. You can take some tournament shots, but doesn't really stand out on this slate. Markkanen and Allen are the two that I think I'd be the most interested in. Jared Allen's only projected for 3% ownership on DraftKings. He played 36 minutes last game. Now, Kevin Love only played about 17, so you potentially could see, Allen play 32, 33, Love plays 20, 21. But I think Mobley being out is still a benefit for Allen. And in general, we've seen a lot of minutes from him, and he wasn't limited in his first game back. And then Lauri Markkanen at 5,400, he's projected for 9% ownership. He's someone that I think, you can use as a lower owned pivot to some of these Orlando guys, because he was supposed to be limited to, I think it was like 25 to 27 minutes, ended up playing about 31. I typically think it's a good sign when coaches don't even limit guys to what they intend to in their first game back. It makes me think that they're not particularly concerned about their conditioning or their health or anything like that. So I think it's pretty safe to assume you're getting 30 to 32 minutes from Markkanen again at only 5,400.
Nice. With that in mind, he seems like a pretty decent value on DraftKings, but nothing that's gonna really be mandatory. We got 1 minute left. Any final thoughts about today's slate?
No, I think that about sums it up. I think Orlando's kind of the key piece right now, at least in terms of value and ownership. So I think it's just really important to keep in mind that you want to pay attention to the overall ownership of your lineup and the pieces that you're playing, more so than focus on individual players and whether or not they're chalky or not, because, pretty much anybody can be a good play in the right lineup.
Definitely, I agree with that. A 13-game slate, it's important to just kind of get the right core plays. You don't have to get too crazy because everyone is so much lower owned in general. So I think we kind of figured out some great options. Orlando is one where, you can pretty much play anyone on the team, and the Lakers centers now are some key pieces. Guys, thanks to our sponsor, Prize Picks. Make sure to show them some love. And we have Terry and Greg following us up on Live Before Lock. They're going to take you all the way up to the 7 p.m. lock and break down all the breaking news. So good luck and stay tuned.
Oh boy, 13 NBA games. The news has already started rolling in, and I don't think it's going to stop for the next hour and a half, which is how long Terry and Brian are going to be breaking down this NBA slate. Show is sponsored by Prize Picks. So, guys, the slate locks at 7, but Terry and I are still going to be on here until 7:30. We're talking about some of the best picks over on Prize Picks using the tools on Awesemo.com, but also any kind of breaking news that happens from 7 to 7:30. We'll, of course, be hitting on that as well. Terry, how you feeling about this big slate?
I'd love to say I'm as comfortable as I was the other day. Like, we came into it with a fairly big slate we talked about the other day, if memory serves, and I feel good about that one. And this one, I'm feeling a lot more scattered, a lot more all over the place. I'm not really comfortable with the idea that particularly on DraftKings, like 5 of the top plays are Orlando Magic. Like, we're just wrapping our hopes and dreams up in the Orlando Magic bag and throwing it off a bridge and hoping it washes ashore at this point. So, I mean, I don't love this slate whatsoever, but there's a lot of interesting wrinkles to talk about, so it should be fun.
Yeah, I'm getting to a lot of Orlando Magic players, and let's start by talking about Anthony Davis getting rolled out, something that I was certainly not expecting earlier in the day. And we just got a fresh run of ownership update that's going to kind of got us a little bit towards seeing, at least as of now, where the field is going. First of all, DeAndre Jordan now is projected for 35% ownership on DraftKings. Probably not massively surprising. It's, maybe a little bit much DeAndre Jordan, in my opinion, 21.6% on FanDuel. I do think he's the value play that benefits the most from Anthony Davis being out. As much as DeAndre Jordan isn't a great real-life player at this point in his career, he's still capable of putting up fantasy points, and I figure that he's in line for more minutes without Anthony Davis. Here's something that surprises me a little bit, though. With AD out, Russell Westbrook projected for 2% ownership on DK. LeBron James projected for 0.1% ownership. And then moving over to FanDuel, we have Russell Westbrook projected for 0.6% ownership at 9,900. LeBron James projected for 1.2% ownership. What am I missing here? Because it's not to say these guys are projecting for like 60 fantasy points for me, but they do, at least in my opinion, want more than 1 and 2% ownership.
I mean, just in a vacuum of everything, right? We're talking about 2 super duper star caliber players, guys that put up absurd amounts of fantasy points per minute on the average. Last year, it was a 148 for Russ and a 141 for LeBron. This year, 119, 122, down a little bit from playing with each other, figuring all this, high usage guys playing with one another stuff out. But with one of the 3 amigos off the court here, I definitely think it makes sense to maybe look to these 2 a little bit more. I am still concerned with the fit. Adam was talking about it a little bit on the last show in terms of just on the basketball court, how these guys are spreading out the usage, figuring out how to play together. 2 guys who don't shoot the ball all that well, 49.8% true shooting percentage for Russ on the season. Definitely a little concerning. LeBron, 58.3 is fine, of course. But just the fit consideration there is a little bit tricky. But with positive leverage and with very, very low ownership, those are guys who operate as like last man ins for me. If I've got the 10-8 to spend on LeBron, I'm always happy to put LeBron James in for 10,800. That said, across crunches for both sites, not many of the star caliber players were really coming up with that much frequency for me anyway. It just feels like it's a slate that's been pushing all day into kind of a mid-range build distribution for me. So I'm not really getting to a ton of them, and I think that could be impacting our public numbers, but it's a spot where maybe it makes sense to, put a little bit of a thumb on the scales and get to a little bit more of them.
How about chalk play DeAndre Jordan, who we mentioned there? I just talked about. He's now one of the most popular plays on DK, flat minute 3,000, a little more expensive at 4,000 on FanDuel, still picking up over 20% ownership. How do you feel about him becoming a chalk play sans Anthony Davis?
Concerned. 25 minutes last night against the Knicks with Davis on the court, albeit Davis, ailing. It's certainly there for him. The min price on DK, it's kind of a no-brainer that you get to at least some shares of them. We've got him coming up 15% optimal, let's say, against 35% ownership. That creates a concerning amount of negative leverage with a lot of other values on the slate. But I think min price, you got to at least go to him somewhere around the field, maybe around a third of the time. If you get over the field, I wouldn't really sweat it because it's that kind of foundational good chalk that just gets you to other pieces. And it's such a strong value play that he doesn't have to do a lot at 3,000 to at least get to that median 22-point projection, maybe a little bit above. We've got him with a 43% boom score probability on the site. So DK, I think you're getting to him a lot. On FanDuel for 4,000, I don't think it's nearly the same value. And then you see Dwight at 4,600 is just absurd. That's just bananas. So I don't like paying 4,000 for Jordan as much on the FanDuel slate as I do paying min price on DK. I think I would probably be undercutting the field. 8.5% optimal, coming up 21% of the time on FanDuel. To me, that's an undercut. There are other values that I'm comfortable going with, and you only get one bite at the center apple on the site.
So this is going to be something that's a little bit different on FanDuel compared to DraftKings. And by the way, we're going to go position by position after this, guys. But Anthony Davis getting rolled out, fairly substantial news and something I'm talking through because I'm updating my lineups as we're talking about it. So FanDuel, you mentioned the price on Dwight Howard. I think he's less appealing there. But given all of the chalk on DeAndre Jordan on DK, Dwight Howard also only 3,100. I think that's a pretty good pivot play. Do you see any sense in that, or you just think, hey, DeAndre Jordan, good chalk, that's the way to roll?
I think it makes some sense. I was looking at the point per minute, and it's a 1.13 for Dwight versus a 1.20 for DeAndre over the course of the season, both playing around 13 minutes a game. Dwight sees a little bit more usage, 14.7% usage, doing a little bit less in the assist column at 3.9 versus 5.2, a little bit less in rebounding at 16.9% versus 20.1%. But I think the production and the value is certainly there at 3,100. It's almost the exact same situation. So if you can buy the same guy for $100 more, we've got them projected for the exact same amount of minutes, 22.8, just kind of splitting the center minutes. So if nobody's going to that one, or 13% of the field versus 35% of the field, I think it makes some sense if they're going to get those same minutes on the DK slate. On the FanDuel slate, it's a cross-off at 4,600. I just don't want any part of it. But I think it does make sense on the DK slate to consider it at least as a somewhat even money pivot. And I'm looking. It looks like I'm just running a new crunch here. It looks like it's coming up as you would think. I'm getting Jordan in about just running the pure optimals, no randomness, no nothing on DK. Across the first 85 lineups, I'm getting about 60% Jordan and about 40% Dwight. So I'm curious to see how many. I didn't put any rules to block them from coming in together. It looks like it's mostly separated ownership. So it's just pivoting back and forth between those guys with like a 60-40 spread. So it's actually the way it's coming up probably makes some sense on how to attack it. But yeah, Dwight's definitely on the table on DK.
Yeah, I think that's a good pivot play to look at, especially if we're going to see DeAndre Jordan potentially get more popular as the slate rolls on. But before any news breaks, let's actually start going position by position a little bit here. And let's start with the guards. And I want to ask you about Jalen Suggs in particular, who he's going to be really popular. Cole Anthony, once again, is not going to be on the slate today. You and I believe we did a Jalen Suggs slate together the other day, but Jalen Suggs right now, 4,800 projected for 30% ownership on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel, though, where he's more expensive at 5,600, he's less of a popular play. And I know you generally tend to play more on FanDuel than DK. I actually think that Suggs is worth getting overweight to the field too on both sites. What is your take on Jalen Suggs?
Yeah, I'm pushing to get to him. Let's see. We've got him projected at 15.6% ownership on the FanDuel slate as of the last update. I'm trying desperately to keep up with our updates. It's a great service when you're a member, guys. We update these things constantly, but when you're on our show, it's a little tricky trying to keep up. But I'm getting Suggs about double where we've got him projected in terms of ownership right now in my latest crunch, my latest sort. It's a player I like. I like the value on him. I think, certainly going to get plenty of run in that depleted offense. And like I started out the show with, there's just a ton of guys on the DK slate in particular who are coming up as significant plays, and you just kind of got to throw them into the wash and hope you get the right combination of them. It's a little bit more limited than that on the FanDuel slate. They're very highly optimal, but they're not as mandatory, I don't think, because they're all like $1,000 more expensive on the FanDuel slate. So it's an interesting cross-site comparison. Wendell Carter Jr. is at 5,800 and 5,500. He's the most directly comparable across the sites. And then you just get all kinds of mix with Suggs. But I do like the Suggs play. 0.80 fantasy points per minute with a 20.1% assist share and only 42.9% true shooting. That's something I keep pointing to. He's going to go up from here. He's not going to go down from here. So I like the spot. I like the kid. I think it's the right price. And with not as much weight on him, I like getting to it.
All right, we just got news, and it's going to impact the Orlando Magic. Terrence Ross is out. And now Terrence Ross individually was not a player I was looking to get to. However, we're looking at a guy who's playing a good chunk of minutes this year, and somebody who I thought we could have penciled in for 24 to 26 minutes with all these guys out for Orlando. But now we're looking at this injury situation for the Magic. There is no Cole Anthony. There is no Etuan Moore. There is no Markelle Fultz, Jonathan Isaac. Those guys have been out for an extended period of time. As goes for Michael Carter-Williams. And now you're adding Terrence Ross to the mix, also guys being out. There's only so many guards to get to in this backcourt. You've got Gary Harris. He's already been banged up as is. They threw Michael Mulder into the starting lineup the other day. I really look at these guys now. Franz Wagner, Jalen Suggs, RJ Hampton as well. These guys are all going to have to play heavy minutes. And we already like the Orlando Magic a lot, or at least I certainly did. And I kind of have to like them more now if it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, you're using the word like in a weird way there, I think, but I think they're definitely necessary. They're definitely pieces of the optimal puzzle here. And yeah, you're taking 26.4 projected minutes in Alex's model off the board, and the fifth most highly optimal guy on the FanDuel on both slates off the board in that lineup in Terrence Ross. So I think it's just going to push more minutes into the bench here, and it's going to get ugly, but it's going to have some more emergent values in the mix and match guys that you just kind of mentioned, like RJ Hampton probably going to take a little bit of a step up despite a 5,700 price on the FanDuel slate. 49 on DK, a little bit more relevant and playable there, but I think on both sites he takes a little bit of a leap there. You probably see more just, the minutes trickle down is going to hit some of these guys. Like you mentioned, Mulder, probably going to see a little bit of time at 3,700. He gets into the mix at 3,100 on DK. So yeah, it's going to be tricky. I'll wait and see where Alex throws the minutes to in terms of what our optimal rates and everything look like. If we catch up to that in like 20 minutes on the next update. But yeah, this is going to be tricky and ugly. And I think this I don't know if it warrants a recrunch because I was getting so much of those other guys. And with the unpredictability, like, do I want to start forcing some of the guys from the bench that even if RJ Hampton gets an additional 5-6 minutes here, he's going to leap from a 0.5% optimal rate and 2% boom score probability to under 10, probably still in both. I don't know how much I want him or need him, but he does have that like lotto ticket upside then. So it's tricky spot.
He's been really good lately. He's been really good lately for a couple of reasons. Number one, he's just been good when he's on the court. Number two, this Orlando team sucks and they get blown out a lot. And RJ Hampton plays garbage time. Yep. So the one thing that I've looked at to utilize RJ Hampton in, and this game I think is a little bit less blowout risk than some other Orlando games. They're at home. They're playing the Charlotte Hornets, who, while the Hornets are good, it's not like there's some juggernaut or anything. And one of the reasons that I've liked getting to Hampton on some of these slates is just as a pivot play off of Jalen Suggs, but I'm not going to be looking to do that on this particular slate. I kind of like both of them. Is there anybody who's picking up ownership on Orlando that you look at and just don't like as a play? Because I mean, I'm finding it very difficult to not be all over the field, all over all of these guys.
No, I mean, they're all coming up like crazy. So Adam and Alex were talking about it on the last show. I ran a DK crunch with totally unencumbered and just kind of let fly with no positional restrictions. And the top four guys on Orlando before this news were all coming up 90+%. Mo Bamba at 93 was the lowest across 150 optimal, quote unquote, optimal lineups. Everybody else was in the 98% range. So I put a 3 cap on everybody, and that pushed everybody down across 150 new lineups into the 70s. You get Suggs at 78, Carter at 78, Franz Wagner at 70, and Mo Bamba pushing 70. And CJ McCollum actually becomes the most highly owned player at 80% above those guys. That's, again, going with the 150 optimal lineups. You don't want to play this way, but just taking a look at what's going to consistently be coming up for people, I think it's going to be important to kind of wall these guys off from coming in too frequently, all packed into lineups together. I think the 3 cap makes a lot of sense on DK. I would even maybe consider a 2 cap on the FanDuel slate because I don't know how much of Mo Bamba and Wendell Carter I want together on that slate. So it's just really tricky with the way that these lineups are coming together. The guy who concerns me a lot is Franz Wagner. 0.77 fantasy points per minute. There's certainly going to be plenty of run for him out there, but just hasn't done a whole hell of a lot. 5,100 is a fine price on FanDuel. 3,900 has a lot more value to it on DK though. So on DK, I'm a lot more excited to get him in lineups. FanDuel, I consider him more of a mix and match piece.
Yeah, so unintended consequence of all of this magic value that's opened up, I'm getting to a lot more LeBron James now as I'm rerunning my lineups. The reason being is now we have all this value at center. We've got guys like Wendell Carter Jr. We've got Mo Bamba to look at. Now at guard, Jalen Suggs looks even better. Like you mentioned, Franz Wagner also becomes really appealing. Wagner, small forward, power forward eligibility. And with just all the value that's available on this slate overall, I'm just finding it easier to get to Russell Westbrook, LeBron James. And as long as their ownership is going to remain as low as it is, and I'm going to refresh, see if we've gotten a new run of ownership. If we have, I'm going to read off, which we have not. Once we get it, I'm going to read off the ownership for the Orlando Magic guys. I think that I'm really going to like getting to these Lakers plays at 1% and 2% owned, because that's a good way for me to differentiate off all this value. If I'm going to play all the chalk value, I might as well spend up with somebody contrarian. And I view Westbrook and LeBron as the most high upside contrarian pay up spots.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, making a decision around getting to some superstar caliber players like that when they're that low owned. We're talking about, as of that last update, like you mentioned, under 1% for LeBron, under 3% for Russ. It's just kind of a no-brainer to want more shares of some of the best players in the world in that situation. So yeah, they're definitely among the extreme pay up options that I like. You also do have low ownership on most of the stars, though, just because of the way that the slate came together. If we sort by price on the DK slate, the first guy that is over 10% owned going from top to bottom is Domantas Sabonis at 8,500 at 13.8%. Everybody above him is owned under 10% as of the most recent projection. So ownership wise, you can kind of go to whatever stars you want. It's just a matter of figuring out how to get them into your lineups, like you're saying. So I really like that idea of just trying to squeeze in some more star plays, whether it's all the way at the top with guys like Russ and guys like LeBron, or, maybe a Steph Curry who's coming up fairly optimal and significantly positively leveraged. I wasn't getting a ton of Giannis, but I can't ever fault anybody for going to the 1.72 point per minute monster. So definitely a lot of ways to get to some of these stars now.
All right. Super chat here, by the way, and this will put a bow on the Orlando Magic situation unless we get some kind of crazy starting lineup or somebody else rolled out. But I'm real forever leaving a super chat. Better Orlando play, Suggs or Hampton? Suggs for me in a landslide.
Yeah, I think that's clearly Suggs. Hampton, you're counting on some of that garbage time, getting some minutes off the bench. So yeah, I would lean Suggs.
All right. And by the way, I lied because we just got another super chat about the Orlando Magic. So we are not done. We are not done with them yet.
Can we please just get a pipe to burst in this building and flood this game? I think that would cap this off nicely.
That's not the kind of magic I'm looking for. Dave Jones, super chat. Do you suggest Jalen Suggs, Franz Wagner, and Wendell Carter Jr. as a core in DK cash? Yes, I do.
Yes.
I don't have any issue with that. In fact, I would add Mo Bamba to the mix as well. And you could play all four of those Orlando guys. No issue with that whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a ton of sense. And you can stick DeAndre Jordan onto that and then just start playing whatever stars you want, because that's going to be a cheap way to build your first lineup. That said, it's going to be super. It's cash game, so who cares?
Yeah.
Cash build, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, those are the guys that I have as the best points per dollar plays on the slate. It's and also then if we're talking about tournaments, you can fit in some of the Indiana Pacers guys that are looking like good plays for me on a points per dollar basis. And you could pair them also with the Lakers guys as contrarian runbacks. And I think that's a good way to build some lineups. But another guard play I want to ask you about, who I really like today, Malcolm Brogdon, who I think that there's something that we need to consider when it comes to Brogdon is with Anthony Davis off the court. Not only does it open up usage for the Lakers offense, it makes their defense a lot worse. And I think that looking at guys like Sabonis, Brogdon, they become more favorable without AD on the court. So while we're talking about guards, I really like getting to Malcolm Brogdon here and looking at the most recent run of ownership on him. It is 24% on DK, on FanDuel. It is 22%. I'm overweight to that number though. And part of it also, once again, I'm not too concerned about that 20% ownership when I'm going to be playing lower owned options in my tournaments like LeBron and Westbrook. But do you like Malcolm Brogdon at his current ownership?
I do. It's a player that I like the upside for him in this situation. We got news that LeVert's minutes are going to be monitored. He's been good regardless. Is 1.09 DraftKings points per minute with a 23.5% usage rate, a 29.1 assist rate in the 7 games that he's played alongside LeVert and Sabonis. And if you figure LeVert's going to be a little bit limited in his minutes, maybe not going to be taking away some usage, or maybe there's additional usage on the table for Brogdon there. So definitely like the spot. You mentioned the Lakers playing at the second fastest pace in the league, and taking one of their best defensive players off the court certainly should open things up while continuing to have the game kind of fly along. So I really like that spot for Brogdon. He's negatively leveraged on both sites, but he's got a pretty strong optimal rate. He comes in at a fair price on both of them. So it's not one where I'm really sweating the negative leverage on this. And we've just got so many different directions to go for lineup differentiation that it's easy to get different in other spots. So you don't really have to sweat the -10 and -13 leverage scores that much. It's a consideration, but it's not the main point here.
All right. I have one more guard that I want to ask you specifically about, because it's somebody you and I discussed the other day. And then I'm going to open the floor up to you to ask which guys you're just getting to in general. But De'Aaron Fox, you and I both talked about him the other day as being somebody who's historically underpriced, but has struggled this year as the Kings have struggled. They recently turned over the coaching staff there. Luke Walton's gone. De'Aaron Fox's price is about as low as we generally see it on FanDuel and DraftKings. He's projected for 11% ownership on DK. He's projected for 18% ownership on FanDuel. Just like we did the other day with De'Aaron Fox, I really like getting to him again. I like the turnaround. I think it's going to happen for him sometime in the near future. One of my favorite buy low plays on the slate today and not picking up that much ownership. Are you going back to De'Aaron Fox again today?
I tell you what, it's a good call. I'm really glad you mentioned it because he's not coming up naturally for me in a ton of lineups. So it looks like I might have to give him a little bit of a goose here, but I do like that call because he's still tragically underpriced. It looks like some of the field's getting to him. 19.6% on FanDuel, 11.3% on DK, puts him negative leverage on both sites. But again, with his upside at that price, a 1.23 fantasy point per minute player last season, just at one fantasy point per minute this year, 49.4% true shooting kind of tells the story of why, and a little bit of a downtick in usage. I definitely think that's a strong spot. When you consider just a new regime, new atmosphere for the star player on this team, it makes some sense that we're going to see this turnaround sooner than later. As we've said all along, I'd just rather be there early, and I'm happy to pay that cheap price for him. So yeah, I'm going to make some adjustments here in my my latest update and hope that I get some more of them.
All right. So now I'm going to open up the floor to you. And once again, I think guard position fairly concentrated for me, despite being a big slate. But those are the guys that are most important to me. Malcolm Brogdon, Jalen Suggs from a value standpoint, RJ Hampton as well. And then Russell Westbrook is a pay-up option. De'Aaron Fox also is a little bit more of a contrarian option in the upper mid-range of the pricing tier. Who are the guys you're getting to a lot at point guard? And it's hard to bring up everybody, so I'm just trying to single out the guys I have the most exposure to, because if you get to a standpoint where you're just bringing up everybody, then it's, there's a million players to choose from.
Yeah, it gets a little bit tricky at that point. But I'm getting a hell of a lot of Josh Giddey on the FanDuel slate, shooting guard. At point guard, I'm getting a ton of LaMelo Ball in the 70% range in this last crunch, just at the star level, going on the other side of that Orlando game, kind of like getting to some opposite action in that one if we're going to that one so heavily. So I think he makes some sense. Let's see, point guard, some Corey Joseph, just based on the value, assuming that he goes. I haven't seen news. He's been questionable all day. Played a significant role last night at a value price and kind of just coming right back into to book in at that value. Dame Lillard, point guard only on the FanDuel slate, getting to a fair amount of him. Another guy I'm just always willing to take a star player, and I think he's coming at a bit of a discounted price. Brogdon, after a bit of a goose here, is coming up in a fair amount of my lineups, so I like that. Point guards, Jonathan Murray is the other guy from the star level that I've been just trying to ride all season, and my ownership shares have gradually been coming down as his price has been going up, but I am still getting to a little bit of them, and I might give him a little bit of a kick because last time I saw he was coming in positively leveraged under-owned on the FanDuel slate.
He's been insane lately, and especially from a FanDuel standpoint, it's just every day he's threatening for a triple-double, and to me, I keep thinking he's overpriced, and I don't really have him in my player pool. I once again don't today, but I mean, another triple double or two, and I'm gonna have to rethink my baseline projection for that dude because he has been absolutely crushing it so far this year for fantasy. But once again, at least for today, not one of the pay up guys I'm getting to, and it's not even a knock against him. It's a 13 game slate. There's so many players to choose from, and he's just not one of the guys that is my personal preference. Moving over to shooting guard. Most of the guys that have shooting guard eligibility are guys that I like to point guard that we've already talked about there. The only other guy that I really have a good amount of exposure to, we've not brought up yet from a guard perspective, Anthony Edwards. I've been rostering a whole bunch this year, and there's just such high usage upside for him. And the Minnesota Timberwolves don't run their offense how I would prefer them to run it. I think the ball should go through Karl-Anthony Towns. But Karl-Anthony Towns is behind D'Angelo Russell in usage. He's behind Anthony Edwards in usage. There have been games where Patrick Beverley takes more shots than Karl-Anthony Towns this year, and it doesn't seem like that's changing anytime soon. So there's massive upside in Anthony Edwards just because of how often the ball's in his hands and how often he shoots. Anthony Edwards, is he somebody that you're getting to right now?
A little bit, and probably not enough. I agree with everything you said. I like the player. I like the spot for him. And yeah, just a usage monster, 27.8% usage on the season, turning in 1.05 fantasy points, 53.5% true shooting, 15.3% assist share, averaging 35 minutes a night. That's exactly where we've got him pegged. he comes up as a strong value across the board. He's not flying off to the top of the optimal rate on the FanDuel slate at 7,900 at both shooting guard and small forward. You get him same position eligibility for only 74 on the DK slate, and he does jump nearer to the top of the board there. So I like him a little bit better on the DK side, but for just a raw point scoring option, I definitely think he's in play tonight on both, and might force in a few additional shares of him here, but I'm running out of spots that I can force these shares into.
All right. Some news. We've got Anthony Davis officially ruled out. No big deal there. Kevin Porter Jr. is in. However, Coach Steven Silas hinted at a potential starting lineup change. My gut feeling, Şengün starts ahead of Daniel Theis. Not anything official. I'm just making an assumption there because that's the starting lineup change that I think makes the most sense, is getting Şengün in there in place of Daniel Theis, because Şengün, I think he's a really good young prospect. He's super skilled. I mean, he's a 7-footer. The other day, he drew a triple team. He's like this crazy around the back pass, kick out to maybe it was a Jayshawn Tate who knocked down a 3. But that aside, I think there's a whole lot of talent in him. And this Houston Rockets team going absolutely nowhere. I would like to see him enter the starting lineup. So interesting tweet, and something once again we'll have to see any news that comes in. Terry, anybody at the shooting guard position that doesn't have point guard eligibility that you think we should be bringing up that we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, well, I mentioned him when I was doing that quick fly through, but Josh Giddey is a guy who's coming up quite a bit for me with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander out of the lineup down there again. 6,000 on the FanDuel slate, shooting guard only. You get him at shooting guard and small forward on DK, but you're paying more for him at 6,600. I like him better on FanDuel, where he's coming up 26% optimal despite a -10 leverage score. I just think at the 6,000 price, he kind of plugs into a lot of lineups and helps get to a lot of other premium spots. So I really like him there. And then with positive leverage on the DK slate, I definitely think he's at worst a mix and match piece that you want a good amount of and want to be moving around the board. So I think I'd probably be choosing to be over the field, and probably, I don't know, if it's at 13%, I'd probably be looking to go at least double the field. 25%, somewhere around there isn't all that much weight wise in terms of what we can expect from this kid tonight. 1.02 fantasy points per minute for the season, 32% assist share, only 45.2% true shooting. So maybe a little bit of opportunity for him to grow as a player. And we've got him projected 34-point median score, 36% boom score probability on FanDuel, 26.9 on DK. That's a heck of a good play for the price.
Yeah. So talking about Josh Giddey, I agree with you. Better play on FanDuel than DraftKings. I'm finding him hard to get to on DK just because we have all this value that's opened up kind of priced around him that it's just minimizing him as a play for me. It's somebody that I'm not able to get to on DK. Like I said, FanDuel, different story. No SGA there. Certainly is going to make him look more appealing on FanDuel at the cheaper price point. Guys, I haven't asked for any likes yet so far this video. Do us a favor, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We've got Terry and I are going to be sticking around for another hour talking about the slate for the next 30 minutes on FanDuel and DraftKings. Then afterwards, we're going to be talking about Prize Picks, some of our favorite prop plays over there. Going to be watching the games over here. We'll be talking about what's going on. Also, if you guys are signing up on Prize Picks for the first time, use the promo code Awesemo. Get up to a $100 bonus on your first deposit. Also, they've got some really cool deals going on with Thanksgiving coming up and for all the NFL games tomorrow. So starting at midnight today, there's going to be a Josh Allen prop with an over-under of 0.5 passing yards. So as long as Josh Allen throws for at least one passing yard, you win. That is a $25 entry, basically a free bet. So go over to prizepicks.com, use the promo code Awesemo, then also bet on that Josh Allen prop, because that is a gimme. That is an easy win to get that bankroll going.
Not the way he's been returning value for me when I thought he was an easy play all season long. I keep getting that guy wrong, but I think even I would get that one right.
Yeah, that one you should be able to get correct without much doubt. I assume, well, let me just check. You're on the over, right, Terry? Over 0.5 passing yards?
You know what? That is a good point, actually. I'll play it that way. Good point. I'm glad I'm on the show with you.
That'd be really funny if somebody just goes and takes the under and just rolls the dice. Hey, I've got a feeling. Super chat here from Miami Mike 305. Happy holidays. Let's go Heat. Miami Mike, appreciate you, our resident Miami Heat fan who was cheering for one of the best teams in the league this year. So certainly things are looking up for Miami Mike and his Heat. Let's move on over to the forwards now, Terry. And a lot of the guys that are important plays we've discussed, because a lot of them are Miami Heat plays when we're looking at guys like, Wendell Carter Jr., Franz Wagner. You talked about some of his concerns in terms of his points per minute production. Not as much of a concern on DK at the cheaper price. We were a little concerned about his salary on FanDuel. But what other forwards who are not Miami, who are not from the Orlando Magic? We're going to take the Orlando Magic guys out of the picture. Who's your next most rostered forward today?
It's unfortunately probably another guy that you just talked about in Şengün. I was getting to a good amount of him, and we only had him at a 20.4 minute projection. He's just coming up a lot on the FanDuel slate. Center and power forward optional, center and power forward eligible, and one of the cheaper plays on the slate who's coming up with significant optimal rates. He's super popular, 25%. I don't love it, but if we do get that news that he's going to enter the starting lineup, I'm going to leave it alone. I was going to adjust it downward, but now I'm kind of curious to see that, because I was getting a whole hell of a lot of them, more than well over what the field is getting to. So that's one I'm definitely keeping my eye on in the next little bit. Another guy who very questionable to play, currently grading out well if he does go, Tobias Harris concerns me. Getting to Wendell Carter Jr., but he's on the Orlando Magic there. Getting to some shares of Karis LeVert. I might have to push that down based on the minutes restriction that we talked about. And then a lot of the usual suspect types, the power forward and center eligible guys like Bobby Portis, Christian Wood, and some of those. So it's an interesting mix at the forward spot for me today. A guy I was expecting to see more of and might have to make some changes was Al Horford after we got that Boston news. I think that gives him a nice little kick in the ass in terms of everything he does on the court.
Yeah, and then so the other thing too, when it comes to the Boston Celtics, Jaylen Brown is considered questionable to play. They've been trying to be cautious. And if this is really weird to me, why would if this is an injury management situation, why would it be questionable? Don't they just know by now if they're going to play him or not? The game starts. Let's see, when does the game starts? In 58 minutes. This isn't something where he's dealing with injury. This is a potential planned or not planned rest day. There's no injury involved. Like, don't they just know if they're playing him or not?
The doctor told us not to play him, but we're considering doing it anyway. What the hell? We're going to roll the dice. Yeah, I don't really get that. That doesn't make too much sense to me, but I guess it's something to keep our eye on. I would lean toward that means he's not going to play, right? If there's the idea that there's going to be that injury management. So I've had him not really on the board that much throughout the day. Definitely would give a nice little kick to Dennis Schroeder, probably a little bit of a boost to Tatum. Horford, like I said, already kind of a guy I want to get a little bit more into the mix here for me. So yeah, it's a spot that I'm interested in. And if we get that Brown news, that creates a little bit of a wrinkle there.
Yeah. And let's talk about Philly for a second, because you brought up Tobias Harris, and I agree with you. I think this is a spot that's potentially favorable for Tobias Harris. Now, here's the downside. They're playing in Golden State. There's a whole bunch of blowout risk here. Golden State, double-digit favorites. They are the third biggest favorite on the slate. Utah against OKC is a bigger favorite, and Milwaukee at home against Detroit. All reasonable there. But the Philadelphia 76ers injury situation, Tobias Harris is questionable. Seth Curry is questionable. Danny Green is questionable. In a situation where all three of these guys are rolled out, and you said that if Tobias Harris is in, you're going to like him, which I have no issues with whatsoever. In a situation where all three of these guys are out, where do you think you would be looking on Philadelphia?
Oh boy, I might just take a pass on looking at them. But let me jump back over to that board and pull them up here. I mean, if all those guys are out, are we looking into guys like Tyrese Maxey, 31-ish minute projection, probably going to go up, a guy we've seen play 40 minutes a game. We've got Furkan Korkmaz, who we all love to hate, and his 0.78 fantasy point per minute kind of contribution to the team. George Niang, who kind of disappointed everybody the other day, would probably step into a bigger role with some of those guys out. 18.2 minute projection currently, but if we don't get Tobias in there, I think he certainly gets a bump. So there are definitely role players. Does any of them jump up to the level where they're surpassing a lot of these other players that we're already excited about at other positions from other teams? I'm not really sure. So I don't know that I think maybe if some of the target plays came off the board here for me, I'm not sure that they get replaced within this same rotation.
So here's the issue. I would really like getting to George Niang and Furkan Korkmaz if all those guys are out. However, there's so much value in the slate. I'm not willing to leave roster spots open for potential to get Korkmaz and Niang into lineups. It's something I would normally like to do, but not for this particular slate. There's so much value, and there's only 2 games in the late spots. There wouldn't really be good pivot situations. So for me, I think it's going to be an injury situation where I just hope Harris and those other guys play, and then we could ignore everything else that goes on. So by the way, we just got some news that came out for the Toronto Raptors. Kem Birch is out. OG Anunoby is out. We'll touch on that in a second. So let that marinate, Terry. But some super chats to answer as well. our guy Jordan Lockhart, the hottest DFS player in the industry, who's just trying to be a good guy, popping up in the YouTube chat, answering people's questions, and people are doing nothing but poo-pooing on him and giving him a hard time. But anyway, he left us a super chat. Shout out to the haters. Appreciate all the content and effort from the Awesemo team every night. Jordan, appreciate you and your super chat, and hopefully your hot streak never ends. Another super chat here from Aiden Queskin. He's saying, how do you guys feel about Jimmy Butler? Let's see. Jimmy Butler. I don't
really
think
come up for me through the day.
Yeah, he hasn't for me either. It's, once again, if I'm paying up for somebody who's not all that popular, it's Russell Westbrook and LeBron James for me. It's a massive slate. It's hard to prioritize every single pay up option. He's not somebody who's really making it into my player pool. Do you have any strong takes on Jimmy Buckets?
Multi-position on FanDuel at 10-1 is a little bit more advantageous than small forward only on DK for 10,000. I'll give him that. Pushes him up just underneath the 10% optimal rate. So, I mean, he's 33rd most optimal player if we're sorting by that, and he's positively leveraged, star caliber player. He'd be one of those guys that I'm reserving one of my last clicks for, to build toward being able to spend that 10-1 on him. That said, like Giannis is ahead of him in that tier. You get guys like Sabonis and Siakam who are less expensive, who are ahead of him in that tier. So there's other ways to go, but he'd probably be in the wash for, for those last clicks.
Yeah, and so I see some people bringing up the revenge narrative because Jimmy Butler could be out for vengeance after. Which, by the way, the reason Jimmy Butler left Minnesota, he just quit on the team. He stopped showing up at one point, and then I don't know what he'd be like. What is he to be vengeful about? He just didn't want to play for them anymore. But let's see.
Thank you for getting me out of here.
yeah, he just didn't want anything to do with them anymore. But let's see. So Jimmy Butler's previous games against Minnesota, just out of curiosity, I think I remember historically Jimmy Butler actually has been this guy people always like, oh, revenge narrative. And then I remember looking into it once, and he actually averages less than his career fantasy point average when he plays against former teams of his. It's hard for me to really weigh it. To me, there's just better guys to get to. I don't think Jimmy Butler's a bad play, but he just didn't make the cut for me. But there was a follow-up part to this also. Aiden also asked us, is Enes Kanter in play with no Robert Williams? Not for me, better value plays to get to, and Kanter might not even play any minutes.
Yeah, same here. They don't seem to love giving him minutes up there. If he does get in the game, could he put up one of those weird Kanter, just putting up a bunch of rebounds and a few points in limited minutes? Then sure, he could, but it's not one that I want to bet my night on, and definitely not with all those other values on the board.
Yeah, the most minutes that he's played all year is 17. And he had one game where he randomly put up 30 fantasy points against the Oklahoma City Thunder a couple of games ago. That's the only game he scored more than 15 fantasy points in the entire season. So to me, Enes Kanter, I think you're chasing upside that might not exist there. Another super chat from Miami Mike. More importantly, pecan or pumpkin pie, Terry?
Ooh, I'm more of an apple pie guy, kind of. I go with a little apple pie with a little a la mode on the top with some vanilla ice cream and heat that thing up and get it all runny. And that's my pie direction. So neither for me, unfortunately. Sorry to disappoint.
Yeah, and let me see if I could find it. Arcathelza brought up that I looked and never brought up what Jimmy Butler did against Minnesota. I couldn't pull up all of the games. That's why. And I didn't really want to search for all of it when there's, I think like Basketball Reference might have a thing where it's everybody's games against former teams. I don't know. I feel like there's 21 minutes and there's more important things to get to on this slate. And either way, I'm not going to end up getting Jimmy Butler. Matthew Brooks, super chat from him. He is asking Jakob Poeltl and Christian Wood. By the way, pecan pie from me, Miami Mike. Matthew Brooks.
That's the right decision between those two. I mean, if I had to gun to my head, eat one of those two, it would be pecan.
Yeah, I could tell Tyler's losing his mind in the back there, but it looks like from here he's wearing a sailor's hat and he's in the pitch dark. Isn't that kind of what it looks like with the lighting? All right, Captain Tyler.
Get a sinking submarine or something. Yeah. Just need like a red light going off and a klaxon.
There he is. There he's trying to direct people home from the lighthouse. Matthew Brooks leaving us a super chat. Jakob Poeltl and Christian Wood, or DeAndre Jordan and Domantas Sabonis on FanDuel. That is Jordan and Sabonis for me.
Yeah, I think that would be Jordan and Sabonis for me as well now. Just with the adjustment. Yeah, I would go Jordan and Sabonis there.
All right. Yeah, that's exact same for me. And Jakob Earl, Christian Wood, guys that aren't quite making it into my player pool. I think we're all caught up on super chats now. Are there any forward? Oh, you know what I forgot? This is all the news happens, and you forget to circle back on. This was a big one. Toronto Raptors, no OG Anunoby tonight, and no Kem Birch. So what are we doing with that injury news, Terry? Who are we looking at for value now?
So without having dropped an update in here, I mean, to me, it's just going to be looking at some of the prime players who I was sort of maybe considering. I think it just gives a little bit maybe of a nudge to Freddie VanVleet. Without OG out there, it's just a little bit of additional usage, a little bit more to do on the court for a guy who was coming up 5.2% optimal with positive leverage on FanDuel, 8.7% optimal with negative leverage on DK. I think that thrusts him probably up over that mark where maybe you do want to get to him a little bit more on both sites. I don't love the FanDuel price, and I don't love that he's only point guard eligible on that site. A lot more interesting on DK with the flexibility, but a lot lower owned on FanDuel. So I'm a little interested in Freddie. I'm a little interested in, the just kind of the pieces in that starting rotation, the Pascal Siakam, a little bit interested in Scotty Barnes there. I don't know if it pushes me into shares of like Precious or Chris Boucher. I know people were excited about if some of these guys scratched. Svi, I'm not really excited about. Gary Trent maybe gains a little bit of ground, but not somebody at 6,500 I was planning on playing on the FanDuel slate. Not somebody at 61 I'd be really looking that hard at it on the DK slate. I think with 13 games, they're just better players, better point per minute guys that I like in that role.
Yeah, so I'm rerunning my lineups right now, and Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam are both popping up at a pretty good clip for me. Just more guys to get to in the mid range. From a value standpoint, though, none of the cheap guys. I'm not getting to anybody who's cheap from the Toronto Raptors. If Chris Boucher ends up starting, that would obviously change for me. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's going to be him splitting minutes with Precious, and there's just better value plays to get to today, in my opinion. But Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, both guys I like paying up for, and kind of like that upper mid-tier pricing.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, that's where I'm just going to focus, is the guys that I know are going to play, the guys that I think are good players who maybe have been a little squeezed so far this season, just because there's been a lot of guys doing some heavy lifting in that rotation. So you take one of those guys out in the form of OG Anunoby, there's going to be a little bit more for the main guys to do. So it's guys that I was hoping to get a little bit of anyway, and now I'm probably going to squeeze up a little bit above the field on them.
All right, we have an unexpected starter, Terry. Aaron Wiggins starting for the Oklahoma City Thunder. He is going to be starting for them at guard today. So starting lineup for the Thunder: Josh Giddey, Lou Dort, Darius Bazley, Jeremiah Robinson Earl, Aaron Wiggins. So Wiggins, do you have any kind of takes here? I have to look at Wiggins. Just I have no clue what to expect from him from a points per dollar sense. Not somebody that I was thinking about at all earlier in the day. So Aaron Wiggins.
Certainly not somebody that was top of mind for me either. 6 games on the season, averaging 14 minutes. We had him projected at 15, but presumably that's going up into mid-20s probably at this point. 0.54 fantasy points per minute.
Not good.
57.7% true shooting with that too. So it's not a shooting problem. 14.5% assist share. 11.6% usage probably hurts him. I would assume he's not going to get a lot more usage joining the starting unit here. So I think I don't see it really. 3,600 on FanDuel, 3,000 on DK. If you see him grab, I don't know, he's going to jump from 0.1% optimal into the 5 territory maybe. I don't know that that's worth it. Maybe he jumps a little higher. It really depends on how many minutes Alex assigns him here. But it's not an exciting one for me with that point per minute rate.
Yeah, it's once again, I was looking at it because off the top of my head, I certainly didn't know what Aaron Wiggins' fantasy production looked like. And then you look at it, it's like, oh, okay. 14 minutes per game, 8 fantasy points. Easy to cross him off the list because you could give him 40 minutes at that current points per minute rate, and it's still not going to be a very good fantasy game. So that is going to be a no-go for me. Circling back on the forwards here, Terry, anybody that we haven't brought up that you think we should be talking about here?
Is there anybody we haven't brought up at this point? There's a lot of games. Yeah, I'm sure there are some people. Let me sort by the optimal rate over on the DK slate. DK is the one everybody loves hearing about, even though FanDuel's better. But hey, let's see. We talked about some Al Horford. We talked about some Tobias. Scrolling down, Miles Bridges. I wrote up Miles Bridges this afternoon, and he's completely fallen out of my head through all the chaos of this slate. But I kind of like him. 11.8% optimal on the DK slate puts him solidly in the mix near the top of the board. Multi-position across both forward spots. 7,800 pretty fair price to pay for a guy who's produced 1.08 DK points per minute this year, well up from his 0.91 last year, getting a little bit more usage at 23% versus 17% last season, 54.8% true shooting percentage, 13.1% assist share, 9.2% rebounding, doing a lot. Breakout season for Miles Bridges. So I was getting to a decent amount of him along with my LaMelo share. So I like both of those guys on the other side of that Charlotte-Orlando game.
So here's one guy that I'm getting to as a contrarian option. I've rostered this guy a whole bunch, so I'm sure people who are listening not totally surprised. Jaren Jackson Jr. And it's the same logic I bring up with Jaren Jackson Jr. every game that the Memphis Grizzlies play. If he stays out of foul trouble, he's going to have a really big fantasy game. If he gets into foul trouble, he's going to suck. And I like the upper bound limit of Jaren Jackson Jr.'s games. You look at, just for instance, here's his last 5 fantasy games: 15, 35, 36, 20, 46. He plays well when he gets in foul trouble. He plays well when he avoids foul trouble. And last game, he was able to be out there for 34 minutes. He's been a little bit better about avoiding the foul trouble lately. So Jaren Jackson Jr., whenever he's low owned, I like looking for the spike in upside, which is always potentially there. I've always been really high on Jaren Jackson Jr. as a prospect. Do you like him at all as a contrarian play today, Terry?
Yeah, that's not bad. Definitely more interesting on DK at 6,300 than he is at 7,000 with just some blocks on FanDuel. But he does have multi-position there. So I think I'll get him worked into the mix a little bit. I expect him to swap back and forth across some of those power forward spots in particular. Only 6.3% optimal on the FanDuel slate, only 7.1 on the DK slate. But you're playing him for that upside that you mentioned, an 18.3% boom score probability for the money on DK, power forward and center eligible, and definitely a guy we've seen produce a better rate than he has at this point to the season in the past. 1.26 last year, 1.13 this year. So there's definitely more for him to do. If he stays out of foul trouble, I definitely like him for an upside score here, and I like him to crack through our 28.4 minute projection. That's a little bit limiting for some of these numbers. So he might look a little bit better. If you change that to like a 32, he would boost quite significantly at some of these rate numbers.
All right. It appears that we've caught up on the injury news and the super chats for now. That's obviously something ever changing. And certainly anybody has questions, whether it be in our premium Slack chat or anything like our premium Discord channel now. Sorry, I still always default to saying Slack Discord channel at Terry and I. People have been asking questions in Discord today. I'm always happy to answer those. But I think we're all caught up on all the injury news now. So forwards, we've covered that. Let's hit on centers. And, we've talked about the Magic guys. We've talked about DeAndre Jordan. Pascal Siakam's popping up at center for me. Terry, who are the centers that we've not yet talked about on this slate? It feels like a lot of these guys that are center eligibility, also power forward eligibility, we've kind of covered them.
Yeah, and that's definitely the case on the FanDuel slate in particular, where there's just so many guys who lock into that power forward and center eligibility now that we didn't used to have. It's created a really interesting situation on FanDuel where, in addition to having some differentiated pricing, we get some positioning that is kind of new to us and the ability to move some of these guys around. So really like it. I'm getting to a fair amount of Mo Bamba, who we've talked about in terms of being on Orlando, but he doesn't have that forward eligibility. So as a pure center only play, I'm getting to him the most. Getting to some DeAndre Jordan, who we've talked about, who's another guy who's center eligible only. 4,000 on FanDuel puts him in a little bit different of a category than the 3,000 dead minimum price on DK does, but I'll definitely have some of them. I mentioned Bobby Portis earlier. He's a guy I've just been getting a lot of because his price hasn't really gone up. 6,500 power forward and center on FanDuel is still pretty good. He went up to 7,000 on DK, brings him down a little bit in terms of our optimal rate. On FanDuel, he's a guy I'm still excited to get to. 1.09 fantasy points per minute for the season, 22.1% usage. Last year, he was delivering 1.16 on 20.2% usage. So seeing the ball, seeing a few more shots, seeing a little bit more to do, and not quite producing to the level he was. So maybe there's a little bit more to squeeze out of Bobby Portis even. Some other guys coming up. We talked about Dwight Howard. Nobody else really getting into, Şengün, of course, was getting in a lot of my lineups, also center eligible on the FanDuel slate. Nobody else that's really only center that we haven't talked about. So Al Horford, I'm pushing, but he's landing mostly in those power forward spots. Same with Wendell Carter, another guy who from that Orlando rotation, ton of him. He's massively negatively leveraged on both sites, which I think is at least worth some consideration of if you're going to knock down one of those Orlando guys, maybe you just take him a little bit below where the field's at, still get to a big share of them, but maybe it's a slight undercut for a guy who's, been productive through this season, 1.05 fantasy points per minute this year, 1.05 last year, kind of is who he is. if he comes out of that game early, he only gives you 24 minutes instead of the 27 we've got him projected for, or if he gets into a little foul trouble, like there's a lot of different narratives where he misses that boat. And at 40-ish% ownership, that's a lot of the field that you can get away from with just a simple, like slim undercut there. So I don't mind that, but definitely coming up a lot for me.
The one guy we've not yet mentioned that I like getting to today is Domantas Sabonis. And we talked about Malcolm Brogdon before. I'm confused by Sabonis' ownership, 8,500 and 8,400 on DK and FanDuel respectively. That's a very cheap price for Sabonis considering his upside. Now, I think a lot of people are looking at the minutes and saying, hey, 26 minutes for Sabonis last game, 22 the game before. The scores of that game, of those games, 109-77 and 111-94, not competitive games. Earlier in the season, we were seeing some weird things where Sabonis wasn't playing very many fourth quarter minutes for the Indiana Pacers. They're riding with Miles Turner, playing some smaller lines and more shooting. I think we're going to see more of Sabonis in the fourth quarter going forward. It was something we'd seen in recent games before the blowouts. Game against Detroit, 35 minutes for Sabonis. Game against the Knicks, 40 minutes for Sabonis. So, by the way, Jaylen Brown will play today. There, we could bring that up, and why we didn't get that news earlier, who knows? But he's going to be in there playing today. But on Domantas Sabonis, I think that he's just somebody who's as cheap as we've seen him in a couple of years. The field isn't quite there, just ownership in the teens on FanDuel and DK. And he correlates well with me liking guys like Russell Westbrook and LeBron James as contrarian options. Is Sabonis somebody making into your lineups?
Yeah, I actually just gave him a little bit of a nudge. I was getting to some of them, but not enough. And once you brought him up there, I decided to give him a little bit of a nudge. He was only coming in the single digits, so I'm hoping to get him up around or above the 10% mark. And I think that's basically appropriate. Like you mentioned, the minute situation is something to be ignored right now with the just wacky way that their minutes have been handled with the two blowouts. And there was a game before that too, where they just kind of got yanked early in that one as well. So he's projected for around 13% ownership. If I can get up to around where the field is at on FanDuel, I'm pretty happy about it. I do like the play there. 8,400 is probably too low price for a guy like Sabonis. 1.14 fantasy points per minute this season. He was a 1.29 player last year. I expect him to go back toward that number.
All right. So I've got my lineups ready to go for now. Is that going to change in 2 minutes? Perhaps, maybe even likely. But lineups updated. So I'm ready to rock and roll. I'm going to check the Discord chat really quick, see if we've gotten any questions in, which we have not. Are there any contrarian options that you like at the center position today?
It looks like I'm going to be fairly chalky at center. I'm not seeing a whole hell of a lot. Christian Wood was a guy who came up before power forward and center. I expect I'm getting more of these shares in the power forward spot than I am at center, but he is coming up a little bit for me. I know that it didn't sound like you were as high on him. I'm just looking for him on the overall board here. Oh, I've got it sorted by DK. So he's coming up 11.2% optimal on the FanDuel slate, but he's slipping negative leverage, negative 10.5 leverage because he's going to be 21% owned. 6,700 though. I kind of like that price for a guy another guy, 1.21 fantasy points per minute last season, all the way down at 1.06 this year. That's a pretty stark difference. He's lost 4% of his usage or 4 percentage points of usage. But I think given a night where he, sees a few more shots, we could definitely get back up to that level of production. But with the negative weight, I might actually strip this down a little bit from where I'm getting to him. I was getting him a little bit ahead of the field. I might go the other direction and see if I can reallocate some of those shares, or at least see what it does to my lineups with 7 minutes to play with. Why not mess around with things?
Yeah, of course. 6 minutes now. Get on it, Terry. I'll talk about Christian Wood while you're doing that. FanDuel wildly different play for me on FanDuel than DK just because of the difference in price, but I still think he's over-owned on FanDuel. So points per dollar, sure, he looks better on FanDuel. I'm curious to see what the starting lineup change looks like for the Houston Rockets. Like I said, I think it's going to be Şengün, but I'm only guessing. I don't know that for sure. And also, we don't even know because, like we said about coaches on this program before, they're dirty, filthy liars. They go out, they say things to the media that end up being not true. So even though head coach Steven Silas said he's changing the starting lineup or hinted at changing the starting lineup, there could be nothing to that. But once again, my guess is that Şengün starts over Daniel Tice. That aside, Christian Wood, this team is such a mess, and it's 5 guys that go out and play basketball, but not together. They just have 5 guys that play basketball. It's like one guy has the ball, he goes and does his thing. And one of the biggest issues has been just Kevin Porter Jr. running the point guard. He's back from injury. That's not going to change, but it's been really hard for Christian Wood to get touches in the post, given what this overall guard situation looks like for this team and not having a true point guard. So as a result, you have games like Christian Wood playing against Boston last game, 12.9% usage rate. that makes it really hard for him to really have any kind of substantial upside for the season. Now we're seeing Christian Wood at a 22% usage rate compared to 26.5% last year. So pretty substantial drop off. I think that's the result of going from John Wall as his point guard for a lot of last season to Kevin Porter Jr. this year. So anything in your lineups as you're updating, Terry, because I know you were hustling to make those changes there. Anything unexpected popping up for you?
Oh, we are just all over the place, my friend. You know how this goes. We find out what we played by the time once we get off the show and take a look. But let's see. Still getting to a fair amount of all those guys from the Magic, which I've got my issues with, but I think it makes sense on our point per dollar. Şengün is the guy who's still in my lineups that's most concerning and most surprising. We have no idea what those minutes are going to look like. He was coming up fairly optimal with only a 20 and change minute projection, a low 20s minute projection. So I'm happy to go with it, I guess. Don't love it. I've gotten Al Horford to a 10% exposure. Dejounte Murray around 10%. I know is a guy that we're a little bit different on, but I think I'm happy with where I am there. Franz Wagner down to 21%. I kind of wish that was lower. I mentioned my lack of confidence in him, but I think as a value play, these are FanDuel exposures. As a value play, I'm okay with that number. I'd be well over that number for him and for Suggs on the DK slate. Otherwise, it's a lot of the guys that I've mentioned. A lot of guys just kind of holding value here for me. Gordon Hayward is a name that we haven't really brought up, getting 6% of him on the other side of that game. So it looks like I'm getting just some Charlotte guys coming back the other way with, not that I set a rule for it, but just on the nature of that game. One of the more highly total games of the night is just pushing some shares there.
Interesting. Talking about, and by the way, Şengün, because I have his numbers up. Right? Oh, I did have his numbers up, and then the screen just randomly closed on me. But this used to be an issue for me, but it hasn't popped up in a really long time. We're in the middle of a show, and then just my browser's like, you're not going to be doing looking at basketball anymore. We want to do something else, and just all my tabs closed. But all right, we restored it. Şengün this year, he is playing 18.8 minutes per game, averaging 21.23 DraftKings points in those minutes. If he starts today and then I end up giving him like 26, 28 minutes, he's going to be one of the better value plays on the slate. So that is definitely something I'll be looking out for. And also something that Terry and I could be talking about in the next 33 minutes because the slate locks in 3 minutes, but Terry and I are not going to be going anywhere. We're going to be talking about prize picks and the contests they've going on there, some of our favorite props. So stick around. This is a 13-game NBA slate. There's almost certainly going to be news that breaks. Also, do us a favor, guys, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and also check out the special we have going on for Black Friday, which you guys should be taking advantage of. We have a promo code STUFFING, which if you sign up, you get just for $1, you get access to 1 week of Awesemo Plus, and this will get you everything we have covering NFL Showdown and single game contests. So for tomorrow, if you're looking to play all of the single game contests, because there's going to be all of them on FanDuel and DraftKings, for all 3 of the Thanksgiving games, you want to use the promo code STUFFING, get access for just $1 to all of that. It is something that everybody wants for the holiday season. Terry wants it. And well, Terry doesn't need it because he already works here and we hook him up. He doesn't have to pay for his membership. But if you're listening, you're not an Awesome member, you want it. Your significant other wants it. Your significant other's husband, he wants it as well. So surprise everybody for the holiday season. Use that promo code STUFFING. All right, Terry, we've got 2 minutes to go here. Your lineup's updated and ready to go.
Yeah, I just dropped them into FanDuel. We'll see what's in them. Looks like a lot of Tobias Harris still lurking around there, so we'll hope that he plays. I'm also going to be riding in the car on my way to my parents' house for Thanksgiving after the shows are over, so that'll be an interesting way to swap lineups if I need to make some pivots there, but they're in. We got them.
All right, so let's check out some of the ownerships because we just got but a couple minutes ago, we got an ownership run. How many of the top 3 projected owned players on DK do you think are from the Orlando Magic?
All 3.
That would be correct. It is Wendell Carter Jr., Franz Wagner, Jalen Suggs. Most popular player who is not on the Orlando Magic is DeAndre Jordan on the DK slate. Over on FanDuel, the most popular plays Wendell Carter Jr., Josh Giddey, Şengün, Corey Joseph, Malcolm Brogdon. Now, I'm going to ask you, which player do you think on DK is projected for the most ownership, priced over 10,000?
Giannis?
Let's see. I'm scrolling down.
Yeah, that's an interesting because when we were looking at that earlier, it was we had to get down to 85 before we got to anybody that was projected for more than 10% ownership. So that's an interesting one.
Jason Tatum at 5%.
Ooh, okay.
People not spending up today. Good way to differentiate those lineups. By the way, we're at lock. If you guys are not sticking around for the prize picks portion of the show, which you should be doing, but if you're not, happy Thanksgiving. I understand you guys might have families to tend to. Hit the like button on the way out. Also subscribe, but I won't hold it against you. If you got family obligations, that's certainly slightly more important than betting on NBA and Terry and I. So we're going to be talking about prize picks in a second, but moving over to FanDuel now, Terry, same question. Who do you think is the most popular player on FanDuel priced over 10,000?
Same answer. I'll say Giannis again.
It is Giannis at 11.7. He's projected for 7% ownership on FanDuel. The next answer, James Harden at 4% ownership. Nobody's paying up today. Curious stuff.
Harden, let me get my name. I didn't hear all day long. That's surprising.
I mean, it's 4%.
I don't remember anybody mentioning Harden all day. It just goes to show how unowned the stars are today.
All right, I'm pulling up the games on my second screen here, making sure I get those going when they actually start. But until then, Terry and I, we've got prize picks to talk about, and there's a very good deal going on at prize picks. Beyond just our promo code, which everybody knows by now, you sign up using the promo code Awesemo, you get a $100 bonus on your first deposit over at prize picks. However, this is a new thing they have going on at prize picks, Thanksgiving special. At midnight today, there is going to be a prop that goes up. Josh Allen over 0.5 passing yards. As long as Josh Allen has one passing yard, you win. It's a $25 limit. It's not like they're going to let you bet $10,000 on Josh Allen over 0.5 passing yards. You do want to make sure you hit the over there. It is a gimme as long as you're on the right side of that. I believe earlier in the show, Terry said that he was on the over. I was on the over. Have we gotten Captain Tyler? Has he given a pick on the over under? It looks like he's going under, but I mean, what does this guy know? Yeah, there's a reason he can't afford lights at his apartment. It cannot be darker there. Let's see. Any other news that's come through? By the way, Brooklyn Nets new starting lineup. Not totally shocked by this. I thought there was a possibility this would happen. LaMarcus Aldridge starting at center for the Nets ahead of Blake Griffin. Terry, what do you make of this mix-up?
I don't really love getting to either player in general when they land in my lineups. Just, older guys a little bit probably past their prime, if that's fair to say. So they weren't exciting to me earlier in the day. If we assign a few extra minutes to LMA, could he still put up a decent game? 1.18 fantasy points per minute on the season? Sure. It's a 23.6 minute projection earlier in the day, had him 4.2% optimal. If he gets 28 minutes now, could he come up to maybe a 10-ish% optimal rate? Probably a little under that. Yeah, it's reasonable. On DK, he was less expensive, but less optimal as well. 5,300, 2.4% optimal. I wouldn't love forcing him into lineups anyway in that situation. He's just not really on the radar for me. But I think it makes sense just based on the way the guys are playing.
Yeah, I'm going to be getting to LaMarcus Aldridge, rerunning my lineups right now. And not that he's going to be popping up in like all my lineups or anything like that. But yeah, looks like he's going to end up settling between 10 and 15% for me. LaMarcus Aldridge has been excellent for the Nets this year. And it's kind of funny. You think about this team and it feels like a team where there isn't that much usage to go around. But at the same time, they don't really have guys taking shots outside of Kevin Durant and James Harden. So that the kind of tertiary scoring role has been taken up by LaMarcus Aldridge as of late. So, like I said,
23% usage. It definitely kind of escaped my attention what he's done when I was. So I guess I'll back up that washed up a little bit, and 62.6% true shooting, 1.18 fantasy points per minute. Probably nothing to sneeze at. So maybe I got to give the old man a little bit more esteem.
Yeah, I am updating that. And yeah, Marcus Aldridge, I'm going to be liking him. Let me see what we had for projected ownership for Aldridge. Aldridge projected for 3% ownership on FanDuel. On DK, LaMarcus Aldridge projected for 5.7% ownership. Give me the overs on both those numbers. If we get an updated ownership with him starting, I'll be sure to update that. But with that said, this happened, post-lock. Yeah. It's a game that starts in 26 minutes. We're on the eve of Thanksgiving. I don't think people are going to be hurrying to play LaMarcus Aldridge with this news. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's a number pretty easy to get over the top of.
Yeah, look, I mean, you heard my reaction to it. It wasn't somebody that I was excited to get to and thinking about pivoting to. And I was definitely under what he's produced in my head when I thought about the play, just as you mentioned it. So yeah, somebody packing their bags, about to get in a car and ride off to go somewhere for Thanksgiving, they're not going to stop to put LaMarcus Aldridge in. So that makes some sense from that perspective. It could easily go pop. It's not necessarily the strongest upside play, but it's definitely one that people aren't going to be on. So I do like it from that regard. All
right, let's head on over to Prize Picks now, Terry. Pull up the old Odd Shopper tool for me over on your computer. And I'm going to go over to Prize Picks. So let's try to find some of the best plays on the slate that we have going on over at Odd Shopper. By the way, Odd Shopper, if you guys aren't familiar with it, oddshopper.com, or you go over to awesemo.com, top right-hand corner of the screen, you're going to see a little tab that says Odd Shopper. You click on that. We've got a really nifty tool that you could use. It allows you to sort by expected win rate, expected ROI. For this, Terry, like I say, I think it's best for Prize Picks to sort by win rate, not ROI, just because there is no VIG over on Prize Picks in terms of there is no, like plus money for over on points or under on rebounds or anything like that. We're just looking for the props that we think are going to win. So with that in mind, who are players from games that have not yet started that have the best percentage chance of winning their prop bets, Terry?
I hate that wrinkle of games that haven't already started. The last thing I pay attention to is the damn schedule. Phoenix, Cleveland, LA, Indy, and Charlotte, Orlando have started. Okay, so let's see. Nikola Vukovic in that Chicago game. I don't think that one was on that list of games that I just read off, was it? God, my short-term memory. His under projection for his points is somewhat interesting there.
Which game did you ask me about? Chicago game has not started yet, I'm pretty sure. We have, so here are the games that are underway.
It's an 8:00.
Yeah, games that are underway. Suns, Cavs, Pacers, Lakers, Magic, Hornets. Everything else is up for grabs.
Yeah, so we've got one of the top on, if we're going in the points category, one of the top on our board, it was a 14.5 line on the sites board, coming in with a 79% expected win rate on the under is Nikola Vukovic on his points. What do they have him at as the line on Prize Picks?
Yeah, by the way, so with Vucevic, what I think is really appealing about him, minutes restriction. So it's a thing that I don't think that books have properly priced that in. By the way, there is no points prop for Vucevic. There is no rebounds prop either. Let's see if there's anything for fantasy points. There is not. It is off the board. They've gone ahead and said we don't want anything to do with it because of the injury situation there. Let me just
Dynamite first pick by me.
Yeah, there we go. Hey, I like the shot. By the way, though, if you guys are looking at a sports book and you're looking for unders to play, Vucevic would make sense. He's going to be on a minutes restriction, and it was news that sports books never adjusted for coming off the COVID list. Give me another one. Actually, before you do, I just realized we have a super chat. Avi Schreier, Valanciunas or Adebayo, and then Herter or Gallinari on FanDuel. That is Valanciunas for me over Adebayo, and then Herter for me over Gallinari. With that said, I didn't really get to either of them today. But Valanciunas, I'll ask you in two parts. Valanciunas or Adebayo, Terry?
I think it's Joe Val. I'm looking just at Alex's board because neither of those guys was coming up all that much for me. Dead same price at 8,000. It feels like, with a lack of ownership, I'm going to go Adebayo on that one. They're projected for almost exactly the same performance in terms of the optimal rate, a little bit better boom score on Valanciunas, but half the ownership on Adebayo for the same price. I'm going to lean that way. Just since with everything being equal, I'll play the ownership game.
All right. And then the other side of the equation was Kevin Herter or Danilo Gallinari. That is Herter for me.
Yeah, I think that one's going to be Herter. Gallo hasn't come up all that overly relevant for me through the season. 4 additional minutes projected for Herter on our boards, coming up slightly more optimal, slightly more owned as well. But on that one, I'll take the Herter side just on expectation of minutes.
All right. I'm kind of curious here to see what is some of the ownership on these Orlando Magic guys. I just really quickly pulled up the $4 on DK. What would you guess the ownership ended up being for some of these Orlando Magic players, Terry? I'm going to start by asking you about Jalen Suggs, who actually is not the most popular player on the Orlando Magic, but Jalen Suggs, what would you guess his ownership landed on DK in the $4?
36.5.
54.4. By the way, not the most popular player. We've got Wendell Carter Jr., 55.32% on a 13-game slate.
That one doesn't surprise me.
And then Franz Wagner, 47.44% over on DK. DeAndre Jordan, 30.96% of laps. I'm a little surprised. Mo Bamba, 25.71. Given all that chalk there on Orlando, people didn't get to Mo Bamba. And, earlier in the year, everybody wanted to roster Bamba, and people weren't playing Wendell Carter Jr. earlier in the year. Now it's kind of reversed a little bit.
Yeah, that's advantageous. I think that's a spot that could get slate bendy.
Do you have the FanDuel ownership in front of you, by the way? I'd be curious for comparison's sake. I only played on DK. This was the kind of slate 13 games where it's very hard to host a show and play on multiple sites.
It's hard enough to play on one.
Yeah, that's true. It was fairly difficult to play on one site. Yeah, and then
I got my phone here, but nothing's coming up yet. So
all right, so we'll give it a sec.
We'll talk it through when they populate. I don't know why
let's go back to Prize Picks and tell me what else is showing up on Odd Shopper, Terry. Hit me with the good stuff.
All right, why don't we jump over and try and find something from like a later game here? Let's see. Harrison Barnes coming in with a points projection and a line of 16.5 points. Do you like Harrison Barnes to go over or under that?
Let's see, 16.5. That is the number on Prize Picks, 16.5. I have Harrison Barnes. I have over on Harrison Barnes by a pretty good amount there.
Yeah, as does Alex. I imagine I do too, but I don't have it in front of me. But Alex has him at 18.49, so 2 points clearance, coming through 64% likely to hit on in our simulations there. So it's not necessarily the top of the board, but certainly in play more and better than a coin flip.
Yeah, I am. I have a higher projection on Harrison Barnes than Alex does. So Harrison Barnes this year has really had an exceptional season, and he's one guy whose role I do not think is at all in jeopardy with the change in coaching staff for the Sacramento Kings. He's playing all of the minutes as of late. So, last couple of games, even one of these games, blowout against Utah, he plays 35 and a half minutes. Last game, 36 minutes for Harrison Barnes. Overall for the season, 19.3 minutes per game, 19.3 points per game, and 35.3 minutes per game for Harrison Barnes. So I'm on board with you right there. Harrison Barnes over 16 and a half points. Those are the first Prize Picks play that we actually like. That is also there on the slate that we could play. I'm putting up the Cavs Suns game on my other screen over here right now. But hit me with another one, Terry. What else do we got going?
Let's see. What about Jordan Clarkson? Another points one. In that Utah game, a guy we didn't really touch on very much through the show, and probably based on what I'm looking at here, he's got a 15.5 projection for points, or a 15.5 line for points, excuse me. And it looks like Alex has that one going fairly firmly under, projected at 13.13, 70% probability. Do you agree with that one? Is that was Clarkson going under 15 and a half for you as well?
I actually have him. I have that as a very efficient line. I actually have him projected slightly over. Okay. It's hard to say, right? Because there's blowout risk in that game. How is it going to impact the minutes? A lot of times this year we have seen that, or at least a lot of times in the past, we've seen that even in blowouts, Jordan Clarkson doesn't impact his minute. He plays garbage time, and sometimes that means bigger point totals for him. So, for instance, game against the most recent lopsided game that the Jazz played in, he scored 20 points against the Philadelphia 76ers in a game that was decided by a final score of 120 to 85. So somebody who doesn't always get impacted by blowouts, Jordan Clarkson could score points in a hurry. That's not one that I personally would like to get to.
All right, a little bit of a tiebreaker on that one. Then I just dug into the bowels of my model here, and it looks like I've got him projected for 16.8 raw real life points. So I'm a little over on that one as well. So we're both disagreeing with the boss, and we'll probably both go down in flames because Alex is the best player in the world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with that said, you don't have to take a side. You could always just try to find ones where our numbers align with what we've got over on the site for Prize Picks. What else stands out to you? If not, we could look at some fantasy point scores and just look at some of the chalk plays on the slate. I'm interested to see what some of the Magic players look like over on Prize Picks after you look up the other numbers for us here.
On Prize Picks or
sorry. So yeah, just on Odd Shopper, pull up whatever's next, and then we're gonna look at the fantasy points for the Magic guys.
Yeah, so let me jump over.
Oh, never mind. We're not gonna look at the fantasy points for the Magic guys. They pulled the lines off.
Okay. Well, a game that is still on the board Oh no, that game started as well. My bad. That I was thinking Phoenix. What about that Toronto game? We talked about OG coming out of that game. We've got Freddie VanVleet all over the board. I happened to be on the assists page. I pulled up Prize Picks just so I could see which ones had not started yet easily. And he's sitting at a 6.5 on Prize Picks on the assists. And I'll jump back over to our board here, and I will find him on here. Looks like we had it as a 6.5 line also. Kind of a coin flip, coming in at 58% win rate. So it's not one of your better ones on the board. So maybe that's more of a stay away. Do you have any different take on that with Freddie VanVleet, just maybe with a little bit more to do on the court tonight?
Let's see. Loading Toronto. What'd you say the number was? 6.5?
6.5 assists.
I like the over on that number. Matchup against the Memphis Grizzlies should be a fairly high scoring game. The total in that is 217.5. That's one of the highest totals of the slate. And also just all those injuries that the Toronto Raptors are dealing with. No OG Anunoby, no Kem Birch. Yeah, that's an over for me on Fred VanVleet. How about for you?
Yeah, I think I would go that one. It'd be another 2 minutes for me to get back to my page with the assists there. So we'll skip that. But I agree. I think just give him more to do. And we might not have adjusted that at the last minute there with that OG news. So definitely one to pay attention to and take a look at. Going back to the board here, you want one from the rebounds category?
Yeah, I dig it. Let's hit the boards.
Let's see. Has the Detroit game started yet?
No, the games that have started is Suns Cleveland, the Suns Cavaliers. That's tied 12-12 on my screen right now. Hornets Magic is 4-3. Oh, by the way, that's why the Magic game was off the board. That game already started. I don't know why I thought it started at 7:30. Of course, we already went over the ownership there. And then Pacers Lakers, which is currently up on my screen. The score is 7-4 at the moment.
Okay, so a guy who's been all over
9-4
the place in terms of our DFS lineups lately, Cade Cunningham didn't really come up all that much in our conversations for the other sites today, but looking at a rebounding prop of 5.5. What are you thinking on that one?
5.5
rebound prop for Cade Cunningham.
5.5 rebounds for Cade Cunningham. Slate over for me. Pretty efficient line though, that 5.5.
Okay, looks like the boss is a little bit more aggressive about Cade's ability to pull the ball off the glass. 7.17 rebound projection for him today, so 73% win rate on that one. So one of the higher win rates on the rebounding board. Looks like he's fourth overall on the rebounding board by win rate.
Yeah, I mean, once again, I have a slate over. If I had to take a side, it would be the over. But I feel like I'd probably prefer to go elsewhere. But no real massive qualms with that. We do have another super chat here from Steve Ballmer, no relation to Corey Ballmer, no relation to Steve Ballmer, I assume. If not, there'd be conflict of interest if we have NBA owners playing NBA DFS. Barnes and Edwards or Barnes and Edwards or Giddey Grant Barnes for DK. Let me see.
I guess if you can get 3 guys versus 2, you got to take the 3 guys, right?
Or Giddey. Okay, so I think I understand this. I'm breaking it down right here.
Okay.
So he's asking Barnes and Edwards or Giddey / Jeremy Grant or Barnes, but Barnes is in all these combinations, correct?
You said Barnes 3 or 4 times in there, so
unless is one of them Scotty Barnes and one of them is Harrison Barnes.
That could be the case.
Oh,
yeah, you guys got to ask these questions a little bit more clearly if you want them answered. That said, both Harrison Barnes and Josh Giddey are pretty highly ranked on our board for both sites. So I'd probably be looking, if you have one of those combinations with those 2 in it, I'd look there.
I prefer Edwards to Giddey though.
In a raw scoring perspective, I think, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In terms of like point per dollar pricing, they're in very different price tiers.
All right, let's see.
It really depends on the nature of that question.
Barnes and so it's I'm going to take a leap and say that the question is Harrison Barnes and Anthony Edwards. That's my preferred combination.
Yeah,
if I've understood the question correctly.
I have no issues with that if that's where you can get. And that makes sense because otherwise you're talking about a $6,200 and a $6,600 guy with Harrison Barnes and Josh Giddey versus a $6,200 and a $7,400 guy. So it's just price-wise, it doesn't make sense that it would go the other way. So yeah, I'm comfortable with that combination.
All right, so I'm trying to pull up the nothing happening in this Orlando Magic game against the. By the way, the Orlando Magic floor today is ridiculous looking. I don't know what this what it is that's going on here. Gary Harris to 3, one of the only players from the Orlando Magic that we did not like there, but they were up 11-5 on the Hornets. I want to check out some of the fantasy production. Mo Bamba just pulled down a rebound on my screen. Let's see who's doing well, who's doing poorly. Who could we tilt on? Franz Wagner off to a hot start, 4 points and 2 rebounds in 4 minutes. Mo Bamba looking good. Wendell Carter struggling a little bit. Jalen Suggs off to a good start. All these guys are so cheap. Really, from a fantasy perspective, kind of all of them are looking okay, other than Wendell Carter right now. Nothing too crazy going on. Really slow paced game. We're looking at 11-5 right now on my screen. 6:30 left in the first quarter. Franz Wagner kicked out to Mo Bamba. Bamba bricks a 3. Gordon Hayward rebound. So yeah, very low score right there. 5 points for the Hornets for halfway through the first quarter.
Yeah, not a lot of production yet for LaMelo Ball, who's in 33% of lineups on the blue side.
But he just drilled somebody in the balls. Who was that? What just happened? I looked down and Jalen Suggs is holding his balls on the court right now. I'm looking at the replay right now to try to figure out what happened. So LaMelo, so LaMelo pump faked Mo Bamba. Mo Bamba jumped in the air to get past him. LaMelo drives to the basket with kind of like one leg up in the air and just gets Jalen Suggs right in the balls. And they had to call timeout. He is feeling it right now. He is hurting.
Yeah, I think we've probably both been in situations like that, and that just I didn't even see it. I'm not looking at it, and I'm sitting here crossing my legs because I know that pain very well. That sucks. Poor kid. Hopefully he stays in the game because we've all got a lot of our night riding on him, I think.
Yeah.
Hey, what about Miles Turner up at the top of the FanDuel board?
I'll switch to that game. They had to go to timeout here so that Jalen Suggs could catch his breath. But let's go. Lakers, Pacers. All right. So the game is 11-9, and they're just coming out of a commercial break right now on my screen. So Miles Turner, 5 points, a rebound, and a steal in the first 5 minutes of the game. Domantas Sabonis, 2 points, 2 rebounds and assists. Malcolm Brogdon, 2 points and 3 rebounds. But yeah, I'm going to leave the Pacers-Lakers game on for a second. And hopefully this isn't an Adrian Beltre situation. Remember that?
God.
Yeah.
Let's not put that in the air.
Oh my God. Yeah. A line drive when he wasn't wearing a cup. He had to take a year off of baseball.
How do you not wear a cup in that? Like, it's just idiotic. Like, but oh God. Anytime the words exploded testicle become involved in anything, you probably don't want to be a part of it.
Dude, just trust his hands. Let's look at Prize Picks now, some of the fantasy point totals for the game. So we talked about some of the top overall props on from points, rebounds, assists perspective. But now let's look at just some of the fantasy point totals. And by the way, if anybody's unfamiliar with the scoring on Prize Picks, it's the same as FanDuel. So if you're trying to compare it to our projections on the site, look at the FanDuel projections, and that'll give you a good idea of what you should be looking at over on Prize Picks. So who are some of the chalk plays on FanDuel today? And then let's compare them to the Prize Picks number. So how about, let's see if there's a number for Şengün. Is there a number for Şengün over on Prize Picks? So I think that one could be important. Also keeping in mind that there's potential for a starting lineup. He's not on the site. All right, never mind. Scratch that. He's not up there today. Who's another? Terry, who's somebody else that's going to be chalk in the later games on FanDuel?
Let's see. Sorting by ownership from the later games, Josh Giddey, 35-ish% projection in terms of ownership. He's going to be in a lot of lineups on the FanDuel site. Okay,
Josh Giddey. That's a good call. I have way too many tabs open right now, by the way. Josh Giddey projected for 31 is his over-under on Prize Picks. I would like the over there. I have him a few points over that. I assume you do as well, considering how high you were on Giddey.
Yeah, I do. I've got him cresting the 34.5 mark on his way to 35. Looks like Alex has it a little bit more tight to that Prize Picks line. He's got him in an even 32, but I think we all like him to cruise at least at or over that line. So that would be the lean for me there for sure.
All right, I'm pulling up the Hornets Magic game. We'll see how Jalen Suggs' nuts are doing. And looks like he's still on the court. I think that, he's back out there. He was able to catch his breath after a timeout. LaMelo Ball nearly airballed a 3, just grazed the front of the rim. But 14-7 right now is the score on my screen. 5:35 left in the first quarter. Magic up 14-7 on the Charlotte Hornets here. Kelly Oubre dyed his hair. Apparently, I haven't watched a Hornets game recently to realize that Kelly Oubre's got bleach blonde hair now.
Yeah.
News perspectives. Anything happen for news? New Orleans Pelicans starting lineup. Devontae Graham is in. Herb Jones starting. So Devontae Graham, Josh Hart, Herb Jones, Brandon Ingram, Jonas Valanciunas. Nothing there really changes for me. Let's look for some more guys on Prize Picks to get to, Terry. And once again, if you guys are just tuning in now, listening to Prize Picks, if you make your first deposit using the promo code Awesemo, you get up to $100 bonus on your first deposit. And be on the lookout for starting tonight, so past midnight for Thanksgiving, there's going to be a prop over under 0.5 passing yards for Josh Allen. Everybody in the world is going to be on the over on that number except for Tyler Xander, him and his captain hat. He's going to be on the under 0.5. He's feeling good about fading Josh Allen tomorrow. Everybody else in the world, pick up a free $25 from Prize Picks by taking the over on 0.5 passing yards for Josh Allen. All right, Terry. Oh, you know what's actually a good one to talk about here?
Here
LaMarcus Aldridge. 26 fantasy points. This is over under on Prize Picks. Given that he is now starting and they've not adjusted that number at all, I like the over for LaMarcus Aldridge pretty significantly.
What was the number? Sorry.
26.
Yep, I like that. I've got him after adjusting minutes up towards like the 28 mark. I've got him around a 28 projection. So I think that's I think he cruises through that, and he might see even more minutes than 28. So definitely makes sense.
By the way, David Porter asking me, are we on a delay? Yes, I am streaming the game on League Pass on a second screen, which already is a few seconds behind. And then also anything you're listening to us say on YouTube, there's already a buff. Like what's the 10 seconds? All right. So like give or take 10, 20 seconds is what we're behind on YouTube. So there's built in where there's a couple of delays that were on with me watching the game, but right now 4:37 is how much time is left in the first quarter on my screen. And it's 17-10 is the score.
I recorded my part this morning. I'm just this good.
Yeah. That's Terry already knew what all the news was going to be, right. Recorded this well in advance. It's very impressive how he's able to do that. And
all
that's
the news,
also,
I anticipate your questions, the banter, all of it. I got it all.
It's crazy. Nobody's even. I didn't even realize it. It's
eating turkey this whole time. It's been great.
Yeah, uncanny. LaMelo Ball, uncontested layup, 17-12 now score on my screen. If people are trying to figure out exactly where they're at. All right, now. Any other news or questions that we have here to answer?
What about your boy Jaren Jackson? Let's do one more for the people from the Prize Picks fantasy points board. Where's Jaren Jackson at on that one?
Ooh, that's a good one. Jaren Jackson Jr. I bet I like the over on whatever it is. Although actually, I don't know if I would on Prize Picks because the reason, yeah. All right, so he's 32.5 on Prize Picks. Here's why I like him for DFS tournaments and not for Prize Picks. His range of outcomes is really wide. The reason I like getting to him in DFS is because his upper bound games are so far above where he's priced at. But it's also because the lower ones suck where he gets into foul trouble. So I like that. I like that variance for DFS tournaments. If it's just a 50-50 over under, staying away from Jaren Jackson Jr.
Okay. I like that. That's a good way to look at that, at that proposition, prop bet, whatever we want to call it. It looks like Alex had him projected 36 FanDuel points. I had him below that. That was one of the ones we were a little bit more broad on with the same minutes projection. I just use Alex's minutes when I'm crunched with a lot of games and on a show here. So looks like I had him projected around 31. Alex had him around 36. So big discrepancy there in our numbers, and would be on either side of that line. So that's going to be an interesting one to watch. But I like your point about play the volatility for DFS. Maybe stay away from it where you're just looking for those the more betting style situations.
Yeah, I'm just looking for the guys who it's all right. I feel this is fairly confident that he's going to be over under. Also, by the way, we've got I need to address every once in a while I see something in the YouTube chat that I absolutely need to point out. But Moki in the YouTube chat, he is not thrilled that he rostered Dwight Howard today. He's coming off the bench. He's not going to score points in the first few minutes of the game because it's hard to do that if he's coming off the bench. Hard to score points when you're sitting on your butt. But Dwight Howard did just check into the game, so he should be able to accumulate some fantasy points now. Other fantasy point totals for the guys.
18 fantasy points.
Yeah, there we go. Which also would be irrelevant. Fantasy point totals for guys on Lakers. By the way, Lakers only 13 points in the first quarter. That's going to make it hard for anybody to put up fantasy points. 5 points, 2 assists for LeBron to this point, 4 points, 2 assists, and a rebound for Russell Westbrook. With that said, Russell Westbrook only played 5 minutes before checking out. From the Pacers side, Domantas Sabonis, 2 points, 2 rebounds, and an assist. Malcolm Brogdon, 3 points and 4 rebounds. Miles Turner, 5 points, a steal and rebound. No real fantasy production in that game. It's been pretty flat to this point. All right, Terry, we only got a minute. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Cleveland game's running a little bit. 28-23, coming up with 3 minutes left in the first. Jared Allen leading the FanDuel slate right now. 17.1 FanDuel points, 8.2% owned, 12 points, 1 assist, 3 boards. Not a bad start.
Yeah, very big start from also Dean Wade in foul trouble. That's going to overturn that's going to mess up everybody's lineups. Darius Garland off to a decent start with 6 points, 2 assists, and a steal. From the Suns side of the game, looks like a good real-life start for Devin Booker, 11 points on 5 of 5 shooting, but no other stats. That's going to make it hard for him to find success from a fantasy perspective. And DeAndre Ayton, 4 points, 4 rebounds, and a steal. Dylan Brooks is going to start today. He was listed as questionable. All right, that brings us to the end of the show, Terry. Anything you want to leave the people with on our way out to celebrate Thanksgiving?
Just a big happy Thanksgiving. We appreciate everybody out there joining the site, hanging out with us all the time, all the fun comments and all of that. So everybody go enjoy your families or whatever you're doing. Have some good bird and enjoy it.
All right, guys, that is going to do it for us. Thank you very much for watching. Good luck today. Enjoy the holiday.